I'm journaling at American Comics, the Avengers Alliance collapses, Chapter 31. Damn, the timeline has changed. In the end, it can only be attributed to the fact that it is all the result of setting. It seems to be saying, the setting is like this, believe it or not. The manual is the manual, everything is subject to the actual product. Luo Chen thought about it, but still didn't put this complaint in the diary. After all, Marvel's screenwriters are not talking about one or two things, and the situation of eating books and eating settings is very, very common, not uncommon at all. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. Above the clouds in New York, a figure floated upright in midair, lying leisurely, as if lying on the water. This person was none other than Luo Chen. Because in the first 2 days, Luo Chen finally developed Superman's Iron Man to another level, possessing the ability of flight. Just like Superman's original setting was that he couldn't fly, but he could easily jump over a building, and being able to fly was also a setting added later. And Luo Chen has now developed Superman's Iron Man to a whole new level, and the flight speed is also good, which can exceed the speed of sound. So even if there is a dense cloud below, it will not delay Luo Chen floating above the clouds, absorbing the sun's rays. As he absorbed more and more sunlight, his development of Kryptonian blood became more and more in-depth, and his strength also improved a lot in this more than a month. At least his physical fitness reached the previous level. More than double. This is far from the limit, he can feel it. Now in addition to the most basic super speed, super endurance, super strength, and indestructible, there is an additional flight ability. But as far as Superman's super abilities are concerned, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and even with these abilities, Luo Chen's development has only just begun. Therefore, the bloodline is still very important. The level of the peak of human beings that Captain America can reach with all his strength is only the lower limit for Superman, and it is still a lower limit. At the moment, a passenger plane flew over the clouds and passed by. A little girl sitting by the window was bored looking at the clouds below, and suddenly she saw a person flying in midair. "Mom, there is someone on the cloud over there, is he a god?" the little girl asked quickly. "Silly boy, how can anyone fly on the clouds? You are wrong," the mother said with a smile. She also thought that her child regarded a certain human-shaped cloud as a person, and she was simply mistaken. Immediately she smiled, and said, "Don't look at it, the sun reflects so much, it hurts your eyes if you look at it too much." Luo Chen naturally noticed a passenger plane passing by in the distance, but he didn't take it to heart. Anyway, people in this world will accept superheroes sooner or later. The existence of super criminals means that there are people who can fly. What's so strange about that? That's right, there's no one who can fly, what's the good? I'll rely on it. Luo Chen was muttering to himself, when suddenly, his pupils widened slightly when he saw something in his eyes. He saw a figure coming directly through the air from a distance, extremely fast. Although he just complained about it just now, seeing a person who can fly is nothing to be surprised about, but when he met him, he still couldn't help but say, "Damn it. It's really come to the point where I can say I rely on it." In a world as dangerous as Marvel, isn't it normal for someone to fly? But what's abnormal is that it's a battle armor, and it's red and gold in color. With his eyes, he can see it clearly. Isn't that face the same as the catfish-faced Mark battle armor? His whole body was messed up in the wind. How could it be possible? This is Mark armor. And it's obviously not to the extent of the just-made Mark I, but the more mature Mark II. He was a little dumbfounded. There is no doubt that the person in the armor is none other than Tony Stark. But the problem is, Tony Stark didn't have to be kidnapped to Afghanistan first, and then he would start making the Mark I, and then after escaping from the sky, he would return to the lighthouse country to start making the Mark II. But now there is no news that Tony Stark has been kidnapped. Logically speaking, if Tony Stark's fame was really kidnapped, or had been kidnapped, it would be impossible for the Stark group to hide it. Just like in the original book, it is known to the whole world that it is because of this reason. His status is too special. He is a super rich man, a genius scientist, and an important supplier of the National Defense Force. It can be said that his every move will affect the hearts of the entire Beacon country. In this case, his safety is naturally very important. But now there is no news at all. Why did they suddenly jump on the Mark II? Luo Chen suddenly felt that his brain was down, and he went crazy all of a sudden. JARVIS, the one in front is Luo Chen. Tony Stark, who flew over quickly, was also confused, and he stopped in midair, completely dumbfounded. What's the situation? Because he saw a person floating in midair. This originally violated the laws of science, and it was already a very outrageous thing. Who knew that what was even more outrageous was that when he saw the person clearly, he was already very close, and found that the person turned out to be Luo Chen. His eyesight was not as good as Luo Chen's. Luo Chen saw him with a glance from a long distance, and he recognized Luo Chen only after flying very close. He is naturally very familiar with Luo Chen's appearance. After all, this is the owner of the diary, and it is also an important way for him to understand the future. It can be said that even if his bones are ashes, he can still recognize them from the ashes. But he has a lot of thoughts and guesses about Luo Chen. According to the investigation, Luo Chen should just be a very common. The strangest thing is his hobby of basking in the sun every day. Almost as long as it is sunny, he will definitely bask in the sun on the balcony. He often spends a whole day in the sun. Other than that, he is no different from ordinary salted fish nerds. It's nothing more than going to the home of the possible Spider-Woman Gwen to help him with his homework. Tony Stark has already figured out these things. It is precisely because the more you know, so seeing Luo Chen flying carelessly in midair, basking in the sun in such a leisurely way, will completely break Tony Stark's defenses. Dumbfounded. For a moment, both of them were stunned, and they looked at each other feeling that it was outrageous. Chapter 32. What kind of timeline is this? The two met in midair very unreasonably, and even felt that the other was very outrageous. What is going on? Yes, sir, he is Luo Chen. The voice of JARVIS came from inside the helmet. How can he fly? Tony Stark was dumbfounded. He who always thought he was well informed was completely dumbfounded. It was obvious that Luo Chen was just a common, but now this common was flying in midair, facing him face to face. Today is the day when the Mark II he has just completed comes out for testing. Because he was not caught in Afghanistan this time, the original Mark I naturally did not exist. Definitely does not mean that there is no such thing, but that it was just a design drawing, and it was not actually manufactured. After he finished the design, he used JARVIS to test and verify the technology, and after ensuring that it could be used, he finally started to design the Mark II technology. It is not until today that the manufacture and painting of all parts has finally been completed. In the whole process, the most troublesome and difficult thing is definitely the production of the micro-reactor. Because it needs to supply the Mark II battle armor for a long time, or the needs of flight, ordinary batteries are useless at all. If ordinary batteries are used, he can only accept a huge amounts of battery pack on the back of the Mark II armor to supply power your own tools. That's not only ugly, but also dangerous. Because once the battery pack is attacked, he may be finished on the spot. And when he was at a loss, he remembered what Luo Chen said in his diary that he would turn to new energy sources in the future, and he immediately planned to start with new energy sources, that is, to build a miniature nuclear fusion reactor. Fusion to power. If this idea is spread to the outside world, I am afraid it will cause an uproar, because nuclear fission has been a technology mastered by human beings so far, but the technology of nuclear fusion is still 50 years away. And once this technology is overcome, the future of the entire human race will undergo earth-shaking changes, because the development of productivity is currently restricted, to a large extent, by the limitation of energy. And Tony Stark originally had a certain amount of research on this nuclear fusion reactor, and in the end he actually made one by hand. After making it, he immediately understood why Luo Chen wanted to wait for him to be kidnapped. Once the news of his kidnapping spreads, the stock of their Stark group will definitely plummet. At that time, Luo Chen can inhale it at a low price, and when he returns from Afghanistan, he will turn to develop clean energy. Once the clean energy developed with nuclear fusion technology as the core is disclosed to the public, it is entirely conceivable that the world will be a sensation. By that time, the stocks that have fallen to the bottom will definitely soar, and the growth of 10 times is rare. After all, this is still a blue ocean, and there is not even a decent opponent. It's not like making arms. Although the arms he makes are very good and can make a lot of money, there are too many opponents. For example, the second idiot from Hammer Industry is his opponent, even if he can only eat his own leftovers, that is also the opponent. Not to mention that there are other powerful arms groups, so even if he is powerful, he can only be regarded as one of the more outstanding ones. But if a track is changed, he may become the only supplier. From this perspective, there is nothing wrong with Luo Chen's thinking. He thinks very clearly and clearly. With this miniature nuclear fusion reactor as the core energy source, the Mark II battle armor has finally taken shape. Today I came out to test the flight speed. I was having fun, and finally saw Luo Chen flying in midair. Yes, sir, obviously he has some kind of flight super ability, and maybe even other super abilities, we all underestimate him, sir. Jarvis calmly reminded. Our evaluation of Luo Chen may need to be updated. We need to re-update his information and re-evaluate his threat level. We can't simply regard him as a common person with the ability of this magical diary. I see what you mean. Tony Stark nodded and said very seriously. Is his super ability related to the diary? After all, we checked his information before, and we didn't find his super ability at all. It is true that there is such a possibility. After all, the origin of this diary is too mysterious. I think even this Luo Chen should not be clear. Jarvis replied. Tony Stark thought about it. This possibility is the highest. After all, judging from what Luo Chen has shown in the past, in fact, he didn't have a super ability, and now it suddenly appeared, which is very suspicious. Tony Stark. At the moment, when Tony Stark was discussing why he saw Luo Chen in midair, Luo Chen couldn't help asking. He also only felt that his three views had exploded, and the only thing he was thinking about now was, could it be that he came not from the orthodox Marvel movie universe world, but from another universe? But it also looks too weird. The reason why Tony Stark in the comics became Iron Man was because of the Vietnam War. Definitely, it was because the comics were drawn too early, and later it was changed to the Afghan War. No one expected that the army of the lighthouse country would escape from Afghanistan in embarrassment. His mind is in a mess now, which is even more painful than seeing Gwen, who is obviously at the wrong age. Gwen is Peter Parker's classmate, but it doesn't matter if he is so much older than Peter Parker, and now Tony Stark has quietly become Iron Man. What the hell timeline is this again? He didn't go through kidnapping, didn't go through a big enlightenment process, and didn't break with Obadiah, so that's it. Could it be that the Time Variation Administration can't see this obviously wrong timeline? Or, at the moment, Kong the Conqueror has been killed by Loki, so this is one of the countless timelines that have been released. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that things seemed bigger than he imagined. If this is the case, then wouldn't my plan to make money be ruined, and I want to make a lot of money after Tony Stark is arrested. That's right, you know me. Tony Stark decided to pretend that he didn't know Luo Chen, and said directly. He found that as long as he didn't intentionally mention the diary, even if he got close to Luo Chen, he wouldn't have the warning of a splitting headache. Chapter 33 Human beings can fly, so it makes sense. What about Tony Stark, Iron Man? Luo Chen asked tentatively. In his heart now, it seems that thousands of muddy horses are galloping past. This weird timeline has made him less and less familiar with it. First, the existence of Spider-Woman Gwen, and then the inexplicable Tony Stark who became Iron Man, it shows that things are out of control. As a time traveler, what is the biggest advantage? Naturally, it is prophetic. But now, things are completely beyond his cognition. People are still these people, but things are completely different. Even in his previous life, it was impossible for him to read so many versions of Marvel comics and film and television dramas, so he only watched some influential and mainstream ones. Maybe this Tony Stark also integrated some unknown version. Now Luo Chen's mind felt like a mess. Yes, I'm Iron Man, Tony Stark. Tony Stark grinned. He could see the shock flashing across Luo Chen's face, and grinned immediately. For a long time, Luo Chen's diary had brought him too much pressure, and now, in turn, it was too much fun to shock him. There's no reason, it's obviously the version of Robert Downey Jr., it can't be the version of Iron Man from the past. Luo Chen thought of a version of Iron Man that Hollywood once filmed, which can be called the Black History of Marvel. In that era, special effects were not yet developed, so many superheroes left a very outrageous black history in that era. For example, the famous 400 Aunts. It is the dark history of Spider-Man. Hearing what Luo Chen inadvertently revealed, although Tony Stark had already guessed through the diary that there are different versions of himself in different parallel universes, his heart still trembled slightly. "Why can you fly?" Tony Stark asked. He was also very curious. No matter from the diary or from the information he investigated before, Luo Chen could not fly at all, but now he saw it. Humans can fly, so it makes sense. Luo Chen looked at the famous Mark armor in front of him, and the person inside was none other than Marvel's most popular king, Tony Stark. Immediately couldn't help joking and said, "Don't you also fly?" Hearing Luo Chen's words, Tony Stark almost fainted immediately. It's reasonable to say that human beings can fly, isn't it completely unreasonable? Where is it reasonable? This joke is not funny at all. Tony Stark couldn't help but complain. "I rely on the flight parts of the battle armor. What ability do you rely on?" "Normally, no human can fly. Humans can't fly. That's because you have too little experience," Luo Chen said with a slight smile. "There are too many people in the world who can fly, and there are still people who can physically travel between the stars." "What? You said someone physically traveled across the stars?" Tony Stark asked in shock. Luo Chen's ability to fly is already outrageous, but now he is actually told that there are still people who can travel between the stars with a physical body. Is that still human? Just going back and forth between space and the Earth with a physical body has to face terrible pressure, friction and other injuries. To travel between the stars, that is another concept. The environment in many places on the Earth can already be said to be very harsh, but compared with the environment in the universe, it is really a warm cradle. Any extreme environment on the Earth is nothing in the universe, including polar glaciers and so on. Iron Man, you know too little. Luo Chen smiled slightly. Compared with these local aborigines, his biggest advantage is naturally the lack of information. Definitely, he didn't know that his diary had been researched to the bottom. "What's your name?" Tony Stark asked. He definitely knew Luo Chen's name, but he couldn't say it, and if he said it, many things would not go on. Even if you are pretending, you have to pretend, and continue to act out this drama. He is here today to test the specifics of the Mark armor, including flight, maneuverability, weapon systems, and more. I didn't expect to meet Luo Chen here. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and at the same time, it made him certain that this diary was not to prevent people from getting close to Luo Chen, but to prevent people from mentioning the diary in front of Luo Chen. Once I try to have this kind of thought, I will immediately feel dizzy, have severe pain, and cannot speak out. But without revealing the secrets of the diary, there is no problem in intersecting with Luo Chen. This gave Tony Stark a loophole he thought he could exploit. "Want to know my name?" Luo Chen said with a grin. "Look at how fast your Mark armor is. If you're faster than me, I'll tell you my name." "Okay, it's a deal," Tony Stark said proudly when he heard this. He didn't believe that the Mark II he made was not as good as Luo Chen. It was too late to say, but soon, Luo Chen's figure disappeared in front of his eyes in an instant, and he broke through the midair, tearing apart the clouds. "Chasing!" Tony Stark yelled, and immediately ran after him. He originally thought that even if Luo Chen could fly, his speed would not be very fast, but soon he found out that he was wrong. He couldn't catch up with Luo Chen at all. JARVIS, measure his speed. Tony Stark didn't care too much, and said hastily. "Okay sir, according to his flight trajectory, his speed can reach at least twice the speed of sound." At the moment, JARVIS quickly gave the calculated result. This kid, is he still human? Tony Stark was speechless. The limit speed of his Mark II is about the speed of sound. It's not that he can't make a faster armor, nor is his nuclear fusion reactor unable to provide such power. The main reason is that others can't stand it. Unless it is an unmanned fighter plane, as long as it is piloted, it will face the problem of overload when driving. If it flies too fast, it will pass out on the spot. So that speed is useless to Tony Stark. After all, he is only good in battle armor, which does not mean that his own physical fitness is also very good. His physical fitness is not as good as that of an ordinary flight member, and he encountered such a pervert in the end. He can fly at the speed of sound even when he is dead, but Luo Chen can easily fly at supersonic speed, or even double the speed of sound. Not in the same class at all. Chapter 34 Iron Man and #039, envy, jealousy and hate. When Tony Stark flew to the speed of sound, he felt that he had almost reached the limit. The faster speed would not only cause huge amounts of burden on the body, but also with his common physical fitness, the speed was too fast, even with the assistance of JARVIS can't respond at all. This is also one of the reasons why many modern fighters are getting slower and slower, because they are not needed. Because of this, Tony Stark could feel the abnormality of Luo Chen's body. Just to forcefully fly to twice the speed of sound with a physical body, the physical strength behind this is already abnormally strong. His physical fitness can't be estimated. Tony Stark chased after him constantly, but soon found that he couldn't even see the taillights at all. Based on his speed, the strength of his body can indeed be inferred, but he is obviously still in a state of ease, which means that the current estimate is not counted at all. JARVIS replied. But it's just the data that can be measured now. I can only say that this is obviously beyond the scope of human beings. This is not nonsense. Which human being can fly? Tony Stark couldn't help complaining. As Luo Chen said just now, it is reasonable for human beings to be able to fly. He just wanted to complain about it. How is it reasonable? Hey! Where can normal people fly? It's outrageous. If Captain America is used as a reference, is his physical fitness comparable to that of Captain America? Asked Tony Stark. According to the data left over from today, the data left over from Captain America's physical examination, it should be far from Luo Chen, and cannot be compared at all. JARVIS said. Judging from Luo Chen's physical fitness, even if he doesn't do his best, he still has at least twice the physical fitness of Captain America. How did he do it? Obviously he's just a common man. Tony Stark said incredulously. Captain America's physical fitness is already outrageous. Tony Stark also obtained the data of Captain America's physical fitness through other channels. After all, this is really not a secret. It's not the formula of the super soldier serum, it's just the data of Captain America's physical test, it's not a secret at all. Various agencies have records of this data. The physical fitness of Captain America is already known by Tony Stark. The peak of normal human beings, and others, such as the Green Titan, seem to be stronger than Captain America, but the problem is that the Green Titan Hulk is obviously not human either. It is not human nature that is not within the normal range of comparison. If I didn't know that no one made super soldier serum, I would have wondered if he had been injected with super soldier serum. Tony Stark couldn't help but said. No, there is no way to compare with the injection of super soldier serum. Does his super ability have something to do with his time travel? Sir, there is no relevant evidence to show that it is directly related to time travel. JARVIS said. However, since he knows the direction of the entire series of stories, he may know how to obtain certain adventures. From the current point of view, there should be many ways for people to obtain supernatural power in our world, except for your armor, sir. In addition, there is also Spider-Man, Spider-Woman. I think the relevant abilities that may be obtained are directly related to spiders. Tony Stark also understood what JARVIS wanted to express, that is, Luo Chen probably cut off the ability of some other superheroes, even supervillains. As the saying goes, the rich rely on technology, and the poor rely on mutation. There are always many people who don't need money for their strength. It's not unreasonable to think about it this way. But about this point, Luo Chen can be said to be secretive, and he didn't mention it at all, so he doesn't know where Luo Chen got his ability. At the moment, he deeply felt a sentence, that is, whoever writes a diary is a serious person who will write the truth in it. Even this Luo Chen who looks very common, he didn't write all his true words in the diary. It directly caused him to not know what kind of ability Luo Chen has now. Thinking of this, Tony Stark even felt a little envious and jealous. He was just a common man, and even when designing the Mark armor, he had to consider whether his body could afford it. And Luo Chen can even fly in the air at twice the speed of sound. Without armor or wings, he can fly, and this is not the limit speed. How can he not be envious and jealous? But there's nothing wrong with his clothes. Tony Stark immediately noticed that something was wrong. Luo Chen's speed was more than twice the speed of sound. According to this speed, under normal circumstances, if his clothes were not specially made, he might be in the it will be directly ignited in midair. Generally, only some specially made clothes can support this kind of high-speed flight without being burned to the ground. Common clothes, Luo Chen will run naked in a short time. But he has nothing to do, and the clothes on his body are obviously only common styles, and it is impossible to withstand high-speed friction at all. Analyzing, said Jarvis, according to the analysis results, the most likely thing is that his body may have formed something like a force field, which can shield the friction of the air. It turns out that, from this point of view, Luo Chen not only possesses super strong physical fitness, but also has flight ability, has some kind of whole body stance, and may have the ability to resist attacks. Tony Stark said. Until now, he didn't know exactly what the stance around Luo Chen was, but it could be some kind of super psychokinesis force field, and if so, it might even be able to withstand the attack of guns. Just breaking through the force field is very difficult, let alone breaking through Luo Chen's obviously more perverted body. No one knows where he got this adventure, only that Luo Chen is very strong now. Jarvis, record these super abilities of Luo Chen in Luo Chen's file, and analyze them. Tony Stark ordered. Understood, the record has been completed. Jarvis said immediately. However, sir, I have to remind you that you have been flying at supersonic speed for a while, and the engine has overheated. If you continue to fly like this, you have 1 minute left before your energy will drop to the warning line, and the engine may burn out. At that time, the situation will be very dangerous. This is Chapter 35. Tony. Build an anti-Luo Chen armor. If you don't stop the pursuit, sir, I'm afraid the engine will burn out. Jarvis reminded. Hearing this, Tony Stark had no choice but to give up the idea of continuing to chase Luo Chen, and could only stop bitterly. If he continued to chase like this, if the engine burned out, he would fall straight down. Even if he has installed a shock absorber in the Mark II, falling from this height is still a dead end. Basically, there is no other possibility except falling into a pulp. Up to now, Tony Stark has no interest in continuing to test the performance of the Mark II. He finds that his Mark II is far from enough. To deal with the common people, it is basically to pinch them with your hands, but he made the Mark II, definitely not to deal with the common people, otherwise it is equivalent to a cannon to fight mosquitoes. Total waste. His real goal is to deal with those super criminals who may appear in the future, and even some superheroes who may go crazy are also within his defense range, such as the Green Titan Hulk. But in the face of the real big shot, it seems that it is far from enough. To deal with Captain America in the data, the Mark II is probably barely enough. If Luo Chen is the target, it is far from enough. As far as Luo Chen's current strength is concerned, there is almost no good way. Luo Chen's physical fitness must be very amazing. This sentence means that the bone density and muscle density are very amazing. It is possible that ordinary guns can be used. There was nothing he could do. Not to mention there is also a magical force field. It is not known whether this force field can stop guns, but all in all, it is difficult to kill him. The laser cannon originally prepared in the palm of the hand might not be able to break through the defense. And things like missiles may not fly faster than Luo Chen. All in all, the current Luo Chen is very clueless, but he doesn't know that Luo Chen, who is of Kryptonian blood, will only become more and more abnormal as time goes by. He somewhat distrusts Luo Chen in his heart, especially because Luo Chen is likely to come from a universe beyond the fourth wall. In his eyes, this universe and the people on this earth may all be a group of NPCs, just like when players are playing online games, who will show softness when spawning monsters. Even if you kill someone, you won't feel that you have killed someone, just like swiping a bunch of data. Once this kind of person starts to transform, he will be even more terrifying than any super criminal. Because even if he is a super criminal, if he wants to commit a crime, he must have a reason. After all, there are only a few of the unreasonable and purely chaotic psychopaths. However, a player who plays games is likely to become such a psychopath. They will not feel that they are killing people or destroying them. Look at how many games with a high degree of freedom, and finally the players are playing well. Just know. Those people don't feel that they are killing, destroying, or causing explosions. They just feel that they are just having fun, and they don't feel any sense of moral guilt. And a time traveler, a person who also traveled to a world of a series of stories that he had seen in his previous life, is likely to evolve into this. What's even more frightening is that the whole person now possesses extremely powerful combat power. Just thinking about this makes Tony Stark feel very headache. Luo Chen can regard them as characters in comics, anime, and movies, with no emotion at all, but to him, everyone is a living person and cannot be killed like this. And another imaginary enemy, the Green Titan Hulk, judging from the punch strength Jarvis inferred based on his performance in the video, it is likely that his Mark armor could not be dented with a single punch. Even the combat power of that abomination is far more than that of Tony Stark, who only has Mark II at the moment. By the way, Jarvis, help me create a brand new profile. Tony Stark said. Okay sir, what is this file used for? Jarvis asked. Specially for melee combat, large, gigantic, and targeted opponents must be able to deal with Green Titan Hulk, or monsters that hate that level, or Luo Chen, whose physical fitness far exceeds that of ordinary people. The attack power must be able to break through their defenses and pose a real threat to them. Tony Stark said. As for defense, at least it must be able to withstand the indiscriminate bombardment of their fists. At the moment, Tony Stark suddenly realized that similar to Luo Chen, or the Green Titan Hulk, or an existence of that level of abhorrence, his Mark II was too fragile. People are not in the category that humans can understand. If you use human standards to measure how to deal with them, it is really putting the cart before the horse. Yes, sir, the file has been established, said Jarvis, but what's the name of this file? It's called, the Anti-Inhuman Abnormal Biological Armor. Tony Stark said bitterly. Why are there so many non-human beings in this world? It's too difficult for him. Help me find out what is the hardest alloy in the entire world. Get it for me. If it doesn't work, open another file and name it a special alloy. Tony Stark said. The engine also needs to be re-optimized. It will freeze at high altitudes. It has already happened. If I continue to fly higher, this will be exposed soon. Also, the power of the arc reactor needs to be improved. How long has it been flying, and the energy is starting to run out? After testing, Tony Stark found that there were not many problems, especially the arc reactor. Although it was very powerful, it was far from reaching the level that Tony Stark needed. After all, although it sounds like cold nuclear fusion, it is high-end and atmospheric, and it is awesome, but because it is condensed to such a small file size, the power and the amount of electricity generated are all compressed to a very touching level. Once he started fighting, he probably wouldn't be able to last for half an hour. Obviously, this was far from enough for him. Other things must be considered, and it may be enough to continue to improve to the second generation and third generation reactors. After giving these orders, Tony Stark controlled the armor to return. And at the moment, Luo Chen had already thrown off Tony Stark completely. He didn't know that Tony Stark had regarded himself as a non-human pervert, and even planned to create an anti-Luo Chen armor to deal with him. Because at the moment, the horror in his heart was no less than Tony Stark's. He never thought that one day he would meet Tony Stark in this way. This is Chapter 36. The plot line crashes crazy. It's not that he didn't think that one day he would meet Tony Stark, even talk and laugh happily, and be a friend. Although Tony Stark has a bad mouth and a poisonous tongue, it's still fun to be friends. However, that had to be fully prepared and approach him in a reasonable way. Now Luo Chen doesn't want to change the timeline of the plot, that would really be of no benefit to him at all. But now, they met so unpreparedly, and under such circumstances, they met in midair. Well now, the whole plot line must have collapsed crazily. If it's a carefree person, such as Brother Hukui, who has a serious childhood illness, he may be able to fool him with a few words. But Tony Stark is another extreme. On the surface, he looks like a cold-blooded arms dealer, a proud genius, with a poisonous tongue, impolite manners, and a broken mouth, but in fact Tony Stark is very thoughtful and deep-minded, and the city is also very deep. It's impossible to just go over with a ha-ha. Just look at the things he has done in history, even his companions cannot gain his 100% trust. What anti-Hulk armor, anti-Thor armor, and even other comics, there are still a lot of anti-series armor. This kind of person is definitely not such a superficial person as it seems on the surface. It can be said that through today's events, Luo Chen's peaceful life will be gone in the future. And Tony Stark will implicate Nick Fury's corned egg head, and behind that corned egg head is S.H.I.E.L.D., or the Snake and S.H.I.E.L.D. Bureau, which will implicate a lot of problems. Luo Chen suddenly felt a sense of urgency. Originally, he thought it would be 10 years before Thanos came, at least he still had 10 years to make himself stronger. Referring to Da Chao's growth rate, such a long time is enough for him to grow to the point where he has the power to protect himself. But now unexpectedly meeting Tony Stark earlier, the time when he was involved in the turmoil can be said to have been greatly advanced. In this case, his current strength is not enough. At least Luo Chen felt that it was not enough. After all, he is not really the protagonist of some hot-blooded comics. If he has a little strength, he will fight to the death with the enemy, and he will never change his mind. He still likes to silently improve his strength behind the scenes, and then crush his opponent with absolute strength, without accidents. But now, not surprisingly, something happened. Luo Chen quickly returned to his apartment at an astonishing speed. He stepped into the apartment and sighed. He knew that sooner or later something would go wrong. Just floating above the clouds and basking in the sun carelessly like this, people will find out sooner or later, and the military satellites of major countries are not vegetarians. Unless he can get some equipment that can be invisible, in this case, there is no limit for him to bask in the sun. He still couldn't help but open the diary to record today's check-in and diary. Recently, Luo Chen has not had the wonderful spirit of getting up early in the morning to write a diary. At that time, Luo Chen could do anything for the first lottery draw. No matter how late he slept the first night, he would wake up early the next morning to write in his diary. Definitely, he doesn't know, during that time he was scolded enough by Tony Stark, Nick Fury, which psychopath woke up early in the morning to write a diary, psychopath. But the contents of this diary are too important, so as long as Luo Chen's diary is updated, he will be woken up immediately to study the contents. Later, he drew a lottery several times, but, well, he found that he didn't get any good things. Although there were many good things in the whole lottery mall, it was very painful if he couldn't get one. For example, once, he drew $1 million. It's a lot, but it's not what he really wants. In addition, the only thing that is useful is a black super suit, which is a tights-shaped suit of black Superman, and there is a big S on the chest. It is made of high-tech alloys. Luo Chen has tested its strength. Common guns can only produce some sparks on it. I don't know if it uses Krypton's black technology. However, Luo Chen still has a little psychological barrier to tights, so he didn't wear them for a while. Seeing all these things, Luo Chen's interest in lottery draws was greatly reduced, and his motivation to write a diary was also greatly reduced, and he would not wake up early in the morning to write a diary, torturing Tony Stark and Nick Fury. This is the only benefit. Then he discovered another feature of this system, that is, the lottery draws can be accumulated together, instead of drawing once a week. In this way, good things can be drawn at once. Since then, Luo Chen has saved up the chances of the lucky draw. Now he has saved up 3 times, and he will continue to save up. He doesn't need anything from common, he saves up a good one if he wants to. Thinking of this, Luo Chen summoned the diary with his mind and started writing. Damn, today is really off the charts, close black lens bracket. Luo Chen came up and used a few words to express his shock. Although his current strength seems to be different from what it used to be, his mentality is still that of a common person. Today, such a big event will disrupt the timeline, or in other words, the timeline has already been disrupted. Yes, the excitement in my heart can be imagined. I didn't expect to go to bask in the sun today with great difficulty, and actually met Tony Stark wearing a Mark armor. What kind of timeline is this? My 3 views have been broken. Why haven't I heard anything from him? Has Tony Stark returned from Afghanistan? But I have never heard of him being kidnapped. This is a missed opportunity to make a fortune, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket now being targeted by this troublesome guy like Tony Stark. S.H.I.E.L.D. probably won't be long after that, I guess they will touch it, and Nick Fury will definitely not miss this opportunity. Maybe I will also meet Phil Coulson, the head of the novice village. Guess what identity he will use to approach him this time, the FBI or the CIA, then what? It would be great if there was a widowed sister, but counting the time, the widowed sister should have been sent to Tony Stark's company by now as an undercover agent. Interest. But he didn't know that this was the former Russian agent known as Black Widow. Tisk tisk, a real beautiful snake. If she bites Tony Stark, he will be useless. Ha 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 ha, that's quite interesting. Close black lens bracket. Chapter 37. The more you investigate, the more frightened you become. The end of Melody. Luo Chen's diary started to be updated again, and this news soon alarmed Nick Fury and others. At the moment, in addition to Hill, who had an agent task outside, Nick Fury, Phil Coulson, and the widow's sister Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye Barton all gathered in Nick Fury's small team. After seeing the contents of the diary, Nick Fury's face changed slightly. Judging from this situation, Luo Chen actually met Tony Stark. The two of them already met. Nick Fury said, slightly startled. Several people looked at each other in blank dismay. Obviously they didn't expect it either. The meeting between Luo Chen and Tony Stark was within their predictions. After all, judging from the contents of the diary, Luo Chen still had a good impression of Tony Stark. Although he often complains about his poisonous tongue, playboy, and conceited, overall, the evaluation is still very positive. Even more positive than most people in Lighthouse Country have about Tony Stark. While talking about the bad side of Tony Stark, he also talked about his good side, such as the fact that a mortal body is comparable to a god, what is the will of Superman, etc. Anyway, it is always a good thing. Although Luo Chen still wanted to use Tony Tower's kidnapping to make a fortune, everyone could see that he was still very friendly to Tony Stark. So they had calculated in private that the probability of Luo Chen approaching Tony Stark was still very high. It just seemed that Luo Chen was not ready to meet Tony Stark, and Tony Stark met him first. Tony Stark will be kidnapped. He has recorded this point in his diary several times. Obviously, he knows that this series of stories called Marvel will start from the kidnapping of Tony Stark. Phil Coulson said. So many of the plans he wrote in his diary were based on this point in time. Seeing Tony Stark wearing the Mark armor now is obviously beyond his cognition, and it should be disrupted. His perception is right. Phil Coulson, did Tony Stark come up with that armor? Why didn't I hear about it? Nick Fury asked. It should be that he hasn't shown it in front of people, maybe it's still in the testing stage. Phil Coulson replied slowly. Although we have been focusing on him, because there are many probes near his home and a very powerful artificial intelligence assistance, generally speaking, we don't dare to get too close, so we can't get a lot of news firsthand. Exclamation mark quote. Nick Fury also accepted Phil Coulson's explanation. He also knew that Tony Stark's artificial intelligence was powerful. He almost invaded the website of S.H.I.E.L.D. do a little tracking and let him know that Tony Stark has a great AI assist. With this set of configurations, even if people from S.H.I.E.L.D. want to approach him silently, it will be difficult, unless they intend to expose themselves, otherwise there is really no way to get too close. Then here comes the problem. At the moment, the widow's sister Natasha Romanoff frowned, and then said, our previous speculation, the story about Tony Stark, from Luo Chen's diary until now, revealed the information that came out. The result of sorting out, should be, the beginning of the story is that Tony Stark went to Afghanistan, was kidnapped, escaped death, and then saw the weapons he sold fell into the hands of extremist organizations, and then came back in pain. He changed his past, closed the weapons department, and finally turned to the development of new energy sources. At the same time, he also started to manufacture the armor called the Mark series, and became known to everyone as Iron Man. Yes, that's right. Nick Fury nodded. This is indeed a guess about Tony Stark's storyline after their internal discussions, and it probably looks like this. This is also in line with the general Hollywood model. A common person, after going through a lot of hardships, changed his past, became enlightened, and then became a superhero. It sounds pretty good. Completely qualified for the script of a Hollywood superhero. And this story should have been read by him in his previous life, that is, before time travel. Widow's sister Natasha Romanoff said. Then let's make an assumption, assuming that under normal circumstances, this process should not change. The so-called butterfly effect is not so fast, and during this time, Luo Chen seems to have tried his best not to. The changes that affected the original plotline didn't even get close to Tony Stark. Yes, I've had people check it before. Tony Stark originally had a trip to Afghanistan to sell his latest missile to the military. Nick Fury said. Since he learned that Tony Stark might be kidnapped, how could Nick Fury not take it to heart, let alone Tony Stark's status as a super rich man? Once this happened, how much impact would it have? And the results of the investigation are also very consistent with the result that Tony Stark said in Luo Chen's diary that he will be kidnapped in Afghanistan. It also proves from the side that many things revealed in Luo Chen's diary are indeed very real and can be believed, but even so, Nick Fury still will not completely believe what is said in the diary. A person like him is doomed to have several sources of information in order to be able to fully believe in the authenticity of this matter. So judging from this, the fact that Tony Stark will be kidnapped mentioned in Luo Chen's diary should be this. At least this is the only thing that fits the current foreseeable events. Phil Coulson said. Moreover, we have found that in Afghanistan, there are indeed many warlords and extremist organizations that own the arms produced by Tony Stark's company. This is also in line with what Luo Chen said in his diary that Tony Stark was shocked in Afghanistan. Seeing that the weapons originally used to protect young people killed more local young people, so it was greatly stimulated and changed. Speaking of this, Nick Fury felt a pain in the head, because it involved the power of the military-industrial complex of the Lighthouse State. It can be said that this is a man-eating beast entrenched on the body of the Lighthouse State. Ordinary people dare not provoke him, not even S.H.I.E.L.D. When the interests of the military-industrial complex are mobilized, even the president can give you a big brain hole. For example, Melaleuca decades ago, and even Melaleuca's family members all died unexpectedly, which is Kai Guguo's warning. Chapter 38 The Widow. Tony Stark has a diary too. The fate of Melaleuca directly made the presidents of the Beacon country dare not check the military's accounts. Even though Congress requires every department to make an audit report, there is only one exception, and that is the Ministry of National Defense. I have never passed you. With so many accounts, I can't figure it out at all, and I dare not do it. Who dares to count? Nick Fury dared to believe that if the president of the Lighthouse country sent a team of accountants to Afghanistan to check the accounts, the plane would be shot down in the air. Even if you are lucky and let you escape, you will be attacked by local warlords on the day you are at the airport, and you will kill them all at the airport. You don't know who killed it the whole time, it may be a certain warlord, or it may be a certain tribe, who knows. But as far as Nick Fury knows about the things that the Lighthouse Army has done in Afghanistan, it can be said that there are too many books to write. Killing people like hemp is already a trivial matter, and they are still growing fans locally, and then return to the Lighthouse country for consumption, and sell the active equipment of the Lighthouse country. As for where it was thrown, I do not know. Lost it anyway. So the local military equipment may be as good as the military of the Lighthouse country, literally the same. So this further supports the fact that the situation stated in Luo Chen's diary is true. The Stark Industrial Group was originally a member of the military-industrial complex, so it is reasonable and logical for their weapons to flow into the hands of local warlords. Back then, Truman said that he must be careful about the development and growth of the military-industrial complex, which threatened the interests of the Lighthouse country, but now that it is the military-industrial complex, it must be careful that the Lighthouse government poses a threat to its own interests. The military of the Beacon country has now become a complete warlord. It is at the stage of listening to or not listening to the orders of the civilian government. If this continues, there will be big problems sooner or later. Not enough. This is beyond Nick Fury's control. For this situation, he can only turn a blind eye, otherwise he may be intercepted and killed by the army or the police on the street one day, and he may die unexpectedly. So what are you trying to say, Nada? Hawkeye Barton asked. Since all the signs and traces have been shown, things are likely to proceed as Luo Chen said in his diary, and Luo Chen tried not to affect the timeline. In the case of the storyline, Tony Stark did not pass by again. Don't you think it's strange that it has changed its R&D thinking under the circumstances of great stimulation, from the development of common arms to the development of armor, said the widow's sister Natasha Romanoff. There is a saying in the big Eastern countries that the country is easy to change, but the nature is hard to change. How can a person's nature be changed so easily? If Tony Stark hadn't experienced life and death, he would not have changed his mind easily. So he has changed his mind now. Thoughts? Something must have happened. You mean, he might know something, like us, got the diary. Nick Fury immediately understood what the widow's sister Natasha Romanoff was trying to convey. After being reminded by Nick Fury, Phil Coulson and Hawkeye Barton immediately understood what it meant. Since the prerequisites for the occurrence of Tony Stark have not changed, but the kidnapping of Tony Stark has actually changed, and Tony Stark actually started making the Mark armor in advance, there is only one possibility. He knew certain things in advance, knew the changes in the script of life, and could respond in advance. Inferred from this angle, then this matter is very clear. Even they were almost sure that Tony Stark must have a diary, and saw the same content as them, knowing that he would be kidnapped in the future. So he didn't go to Afghanistan, and he pushed the trip directly. Even if the board of directors was a little dissatisfied with him not going to Afghanistan, which caused some twists and turns in the military's new missile issue, Tony Stark also went his own way, and I just didn't go. All this has a reasonable explanation. And he also knew that he would rely on his armor to become Iron Man in the future, so why not arm himself in advance now? Looks like it's time to reach out to him early, Nick Fury said. In fact, he has long had the idea of contacting Tony Stark, but he has been waiting for the things mentioned in Luo Chen's diary to happen, and after Tony Stark has experienced catastrophe and became Iron Man, he will be based on him and drawn into him. Among my own Avengers. Who knew that the plan couldn't keep up with the changes? He, like Luo Chen, was caught off guard by Tony Stark's sudden change. Several people nodded, especially the widow's sister Natasha Romanoff said. Especially you want to build the Avengers, Barton and I are not enough, if you can bring in Tony Stark, you will not only bring in a super strong combat power, and most importantly, we have a source of funding. Nick Fury nodded. The source of funding is also one of the reasons why he has not established Avengers for a long time, because Avengers is not a regular institution and organization of S.H.I.E.L.D., but a newly established one. Behind S.H.I.E.L.D. are the 5 major countries, and each of the 5 major countries is difficult to deal with. They have a huge team of accountants to calculate where every penny of the funds they give is spent. So if you want to use money, you have to build an unprecedented organization. The resistance is not ordinary, and it is very likely that you will be stuck with funds. And he, Nick Fury, is not yet as courageous as the military-industrial complex, daring to take down the accounting team of the 5 major countries, unless he doesn't want to live anymore. In this kind of organization with multiple bosses, it takes a long time to explain every expenditure of funds. Nick Fury is also very troublesome, especially because many of the funds are still secret and cannot be disclosed. But if we can bring in Tony Stark and get some sponsorship from him, it doesn't take much. If you get him a sponsorship of hundreds of millions of USD every year, then Avengers funding will be there, and it's not just a normal one. That's completely rich. You don't have to explain to the top 5 bosses all day what you are going to do. Makes sense. Nick Fury thought of this, and immediately had the motivation to act, pulling Tony Stark in. It can be said that many problems were solved at once. Another reliable combat force was added, otherwise it would only rely on the widow's sister Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye Barton, which is just the level of an ordinary agent team. And there is one more big benefactor. Chapter 39. The more you guess, the closer you are to the truth. Then Tony Stark is a real rich man. Once it gets the support of Tony Stark, the future of this Avengers organization can be said to have a bright future. Hey, what a missed opportunity. Hawkeye Barton said with a sigh. You don't want to buy the Stark Group too? Widow's sister Natasha Romanoff glanced at Hawkeye Barton and said. Hawkeye Barton smiled sheepishly, and then said, Nada, you know mine. I have a big family to support. Although the welfare of S.H.I.E.L.D. is not bad, it is still not enough. I also want to earn some money like this. Several people looked at each other and smiled. In fact, this idea is not only Hawkeye Barton's, they also have it. I don't know that risk is gambling, but predicting that I will make a lot of money is investment. Even though they are all agents, all of them are considered to be high-ranking and powerful in S.H.I.E.L.D., but they are still living in poverty, which is not comparable to real rich people. It can only be regarded as maintaining the life of an elite middle class, or even worse. If this wave is earned, it will directly earn retirement money. It's a pity that Luo Chen didn't wait until Tony Stark was caught and the stock price plummeted, neither did they. So it's a pity for Luo Chen, and they are also a pity. Nick Fury continued to watch. He saw Luo Chen complaining that he was being targeted by Tony Stark, and he actually knew about S.H.I.E.L.D. later, but after thinking about it, he understood that S.H.I.E.L.D. is very mysterious to the common people, even if it's a super rich man like Tony Stark, and he doesn't know it, but for Luo Chen who knows everything, there shouldn't be any secrets. Braised egghead, ha 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 ha. Widow sister Natasha Romanoff saw Luo Chen's good description of Nick Fury in the diary, and she knew what a spiced egg was. That is a way of eating eggs in a big Eastern country. Now look at it, it really looks like it. And Nick Fury's already dark complexion is even darker now. Luo Chen said more than once that he is a braised egghead. Although they all complained about him in the diary, the problem is that now this diary has been seen by many of his subordinates, especially Tony Stark. He can completely imagine how Tony Stark's poisonous tongue would complain about him. At that time, we will definitely not let him go. Then as the diary continues to spread, more people may see him called braised egghead. So angry, it seems to beat him up. It's not just Fury, but also Phil Coulson, your nickname, the head of Shinsho Village. What illusion is there? Hawkeye Barton couldn't help but said. The head of Novice Village usually only appears in the game. It refers to some games where the protagonist has just arrived, or the leader of the place that just appeared. Widow sister Natasha Romanoff said. Everyone thought about it, but they still didn't know what the illusion was. They really couldn't figure out what kind of relationship Phil Coulson would have with the village head of Shinsho Village, so they just let it go. But he seems to know Phil Coulson very well about your style of conduct. He knows that you will often pretend to be FBI and CIA activities. Widow sister Natasha Romanoff joked. Phil Coulson could only grin, and then said, after all, our S.H.I.E.L.D. is a secret organization. Most of the time, outsiders don't know it at all. It is far less useful than the FBI and CIA. In fact, it's not just Phil Coulson. In fact, there are a lot of FBI and CIA certificates in S.H.I.E.L.D. They are all done for the convenience of work. Not only the FBI and CIA, but also the intelligence organizations of other 5 major countries. Except for the big Eastern country under the management of the impeccable Shakespeare Bureau, other places can basically pass without hindrance. It's all right now, he's exposed that I'm going undercover. Widow sister Natasha Romanoff couldn't help complaining. You haven't sent me there yet, and it's already known by now, and Tony Stark probably knows it too. Nick Fury is also having a headache. He does plan to send the widowed sister Natasha Romanoff to go undercover beside Tony Stark, on the one hand to protect him, and on the other hand to observe him to see if he is suitable to be a member of the Avengers. He also knew very well that Tony Stark was naturally not a bad person, but he was really lustful. He had slept with models, and he couldn't count the number of them. It was also the reason why he sent his widow sister Natasha Romanoff there. But one thing is very strange, how could Luo Chen be noticed by Tony Stark? Nick Fury said. He said in his diary that he just went to bask in the sun even if Tony Stark approached him on purpose. How did he know that he was being targeted by Tony Stark? There should be no other reason for basking in the sun. What does that mean? Maybe this basking in the sun is some kind of code word, a secret he can't tell, and this secret was caught by Tony Stark, so I was sure that I would be targeted by Tony Stark. Widow sister Natasha Romanoff said. Forget it, when the time comes, I'll go to Tony Stark, have a face-to-face exchange, and then ask him about this matter. Nick Fury thought about it, but gave up and continued the discussion. Damn it, you bastard. Tony Stark saw the end, and naturally he also saw that Nick Fury was going to send an undercover agent to his side, and he immediately hated it. How can he bear this grievance? Although judging from Luo Chen's diary, they may become colleagues in the future, or even comrades in arms fighting side by side. But he still couldn't understand Nick Fury's behavior. You also said that I am lustful, and you are thinking about Spider-Woman and that girl in your diary every day. Tony Stark refused to accept it, although he was indeed lustful, active in nightclubs every day, smoking and drinking, but he is still a good boy. When he returned to his mansion, he saw that Luo Chen had updated his diary again. He couldn't help but take a look, only to see Luo Chen complaining that he was lustful. But even though he was half dead with anger now, he still asked Jarvis to write down the names of these people immediately. Shinsho Village head Phil Coulson, Braised Egg head S.H.I.E.L.D. director, and widow sister, the former Russian Ross agent, Beautiful Snake. It was obviously very dangerous, but Tony Stark had never been in contact with such a woman before, and now he was a little excited. A former Russian Ross agent, if he can take it down, it will be much more exciting than sleeping with some cover girl. Tony Stark, who has not really experienced the kidnapping in Afghanistan, has been greatly impacted, and his thinking has sublimated. He has not yet broken away from low-level tastes, and his thinking has not yet fully enlightened. Chapter 40. Snake and Shield Exposure. Tony Stark, who has not yet broken away from vulgar tastes, is still very interested in the widow sister. After all, Luo Chen described her in the diary as being so popular in the world outside the fourth wall. It was normal for Tony Stark to have a little interest, he was a normal man after all. Although this may be a beautiful snake, according to what Luo Chen said in his diary, one bite would be fatal, but Tony Stark is also a hero, so he has nothing to be afraid of. The more I think about it, the more extreme I become. Just shield is fine, if it also arouses the idea of the Snake and Shield Bureau, then everything will be troublesome. If they are entangled by the Snake and Shield Bureau, it must be the result of endless death, unless they are completely eradicated. Close black lens bracket. Snake Shield. When this brand new term came out, everyone was confused. What is shield? What is Snake and Shield? Tony Stark had a headache. Why are these two words so unfamiliar? He hadn't heard of it at all. JARVIS, this shield and the Snake Shield Bureau, what kind of country's intelligence agency is it? Or is this a new intelligence agency established by our lighthouse country? Tony Stark asked. Sir, judging from my current database and the information I can search on the internet, there is no shield and Snake Shield. JARVIS said. However, it is said in the diary that Phil Coulson will use the identity of the FBI and CIA, indicating that this shield may have the ability to use the intelligence network of the FBI and CIA, and the level may be higher than these two agencies. In the lighthouse country, no, there are intelligence organizations with a higher level than the FBI and CIA in the whole world. Tony Stark's first reaction was disbelief. How could this be possible? Could it be, there really is an inner world? Tony Stark suddenly remembered something. At his level of identity, even though he couldn't see the whole picture of the deeper world, or the world on the extraordinary side, he still knew a little bit. This is a popular saying on the internet, that is, the outside world and the inside world. The table world is the kind that everyone knows, superficial, and everyone knows the world. The highest level is the political leaders of various countries, and the top rich people of each country, and then they are arranged in order. And Tony Stark is one of the top figures in the watch world. In addition, there is another saying on the internet, or this kind of saying has a long history, that is, besides the watch world, there is also an inner world, such as the well-known dark net and the like. There are some underground dignitaries, killer organizations, mercenaries, etc. are all products of the other world. But that's all. Tony Stark has a vague understanding of these things, but he dismisses them. The world and the world are vulnerable in front of capital. So he has never learned much about the inner world. At most, he has bought some things that are not easy to buy on the dark web, let alone special metals such as vibranium. But now Luo Chen's statement has completely subverted Tony Stark's daily cognition. The outside world does not override the inner world, and there may be some deep power in the inner world that even Tony Stark cannot understand. There are still some organizations with a higher level than the FBI and CIA, and they can even easily pretend to be the agents of these two organizations. Does the president of the lighthouse know it, and do the politicians of various countries know it? Even this organization has to send so-called beauty snakes like widow sisters to come undercover in the company. What are they trying to do? Tony Stark's sense of crisis was suddenly aroused. Judging from the information we have seen so far, there may really be another world that we don't know about. JARVIS replied directly. JARVIS, create a brand new file called the Inner World, and usually pay more attention to searching for information about the so-called inner world that may exist on the internet, and you can put it in it. Tony Stark said. Then create two files, Shield and Snake Shield Bureau, and search for the information of these two organizations, especially this Shield. Judging from Luo Chen's diary, we are likely to be targeted by Shield. Yes sir, file created, said JARVIS. Sir, judging from Luo Chen's diary, Shield doesn't seem to have too much malice towards you, and you can be classified into the neutral camp for the time being, But this Snake Shield Bureau, from the name, is very similar to SHIELD, but it seems to be more dangerous. There may even be violent conflicts, endless death. It's not clear why SHIELD is following me, but judging from Luo Chen's words, SHIELD may be following me now. This SHIELD, what kind of braised egghead, may use me to contact Luo Chen and the same keep an eye on him. Tony Stark said. Since this Luo Chen is so determined, it is likely that this is the case. We are being watched. Chapter 41. Can the Snake and Shield Bureau still be Hydra? What a smart person Tony Stark was. He could tell from just a few words that he had been being followed by this so-called SHIELD. They even have to send agents to lurk, but it seems that they are just stalking. The real trouble is the Snake Shield Bureau mentioned by Luo Chen later. This Snake Shield Bureau has not yet had any intersection with Luo Chen, but Luo Chen judged that if they are targeted, they will end up dying unless they are completely eradicated. Luo Chen was originally just an orphan. There is nothing special about him. He is also very ordinary in terms of race. In terms of assets, he can be regarded as one of the few on the street. Apart from being a little handsome, there is nothing special about him. Yes, only a little handsome, compared to Tony Stark. Obviously there is still a huge gap. The only thing that might draw attention to him and get entangled by the Snake and Shield Bureau might be his super ability. Shield on. Tony Stark said. From this point of view, I have a battle armor, may I also become the target of the Snake Shield Bureau? Yes, sir, logically, that makes sense. Jarvis agreed with Tony Stark's attention. But now in SHIELD we already know that there is a braised egghead named Nick Fury, a Shinsho village chief named Phil Coulson, and a so-called beautiful snake named Widow Sister, and what about this Snake Shield Bureau? Too little information. Tony Stark couldn't help but say. However, Luo Chen's diary mentioned the most dangerous Snake Shield Bureau the least. But if we continue to read, we may know what the Snake and Shield Bureau is. Tony Stark said, and now we can only continue to wait for more news, and more of the true colors of this world will be revealed. The world has gradually revealed a look that he can't understand. At the same time, on the other side, several people in SHIELD also looked at each other in dismay. SHIELD and the others definitely knew that they belonged to SHIELD. But this Snake Shield Bureau has indeed touched their blind spot of knowledge. What Snake Shield Bureau? I've heard of the Spear Bureau, but this Snake Shield Bureau? Hawkeye Barton said after a pause. The Spear Bureau is an organization under the command of the mysterious Eastern Power. Its function is similar to that of SHIELD, but it is even more mysterious. Hawkeye Barton has cooperated with them several times in the execution of missions, but that's all. Most of the time, in fact, just know some names. This Snake and Shield Bureau looks like some kind of joke to me. Widow Sister Natasha Romanoff said. In Luo Chen's diary, there are often pronouns. For example, Fu Rui, your pronoun is braised egghead. He called me Widow Sister, which may have something to do with my nickname Black Widow, so this Snake Shield Bureau may not be. It is an organization we never know, or it may be the nickname and code name of an organization we know. Nick Fury's eyes lit up. Yes, this is the idea. As the director of SHIELD, he is considered a well-known #1 figure in the other world. Although he cannot appear in front of the public, he is still considered a big boss. There is no possibility that there is any organization that he has never heard of. What the Widow Sister Natasha Romanoff said provides a new way of thinking. Yeah, it's probably most likely not some unknown organization, it's just a designation. But what organization is symbolized by a snake? A snake, a shield. Phil Coulson thought for a while, and there seemed to be no such existence. There are tribes, organizations, and even myths marked by snakes, but according to Luo Chen, they are dangerous, and they may even be targeted after SHIELD. It is definitely not a small organization. But they haven't heard of it, which is very weird. The most famous one with the snake as its symbol is Hydra. Hawkeye Barton said with a smile. A few people laughed as they talked. At their level, they naturally know about Hydra, but Hydra was finished during World War II. Even the leader died with Captain America Rogers. About 70 people have disappeared so far. It's been years, and I haven't seen him come out again to cause harm to the world. Presumably not. But not Hydra, who else? However, judging from what Luo Chen said in his diary, he fears and hates this organization very much. Judging from his identity as an audience outside the fourth wall, it should be a mysterious and evil organization. There may be chaos in the future, and even cause great harm and influence. That's why Luo Chen is so afraid. After laughing, Phil Coulson continued to analyze. It makes sense. Write down the name of the Snake and Shield Bureau, and quietly investigate in the future to see if there is any organization whose name and characteristics match this name. Nick Fury said. Maintaining world peace is also one of SHIELD's missions, but the truth is something they never expected. Chapter 42 Tony. Uncle Obadiah is behind the scenes. Impossible. Tony Stark wearing the Mark armor, the turbulent world Mr. Luo said has already begun. Gwen took the time to look at this diary during the break. She discovered a very miraculous point, that is, the diary can be stored in the body and only taken out when needed. She is even more sure that this notebook is not simple. Gwen is already very busy just to complete her homework every day, and has no extra time to analyze all kinds of information in acting skills. For her, this is an important source for her to understand Teacher Luo, but it is only an important source. Source only. Ms. Luo hasn't come to help with homework for several days. Did you go to bask in the sun? Gwen blinked her beautiful eyes and pursed her thin lips. I don't understand what is good to write in the diary in the sun. She suddenly remembered that the first few days in Luo Chen's diary seemed to be on X month X, and today he was basking in the sun, and on X month X, today was another day in the sun. On X, it was raining today, so I had to find another place to bask in the sun, and it was another day waiting for Tony Stark to be kidnapped. And so on. He mentioned in his diary that he often basks in the sun, and she was a little curious, is the sun really that good? Although tanning can be regarded as a trend in the lighthouse country, the bronze and wheat-colored skin is considered a symbol of charm in the lighthouse country, but Luo Chen still has a pretty face, and his skin is rare among Asians of cold white skin. She was a little skeptical. Luo Chen said every day that she went to the sun. Where did she go? No matter how sunburned, it won't turn black. Could it be that Teacher Luo likes bronze-skinned women? Gwen blushed when she thought of this. Judging from the women Luo Chen misses in the diary, it seems that she prefers those with a bulging figure, but he is not bad either. Which hell timeline is this again? I can't quite figure it out. I almost thought it was Tom Cruise's version of Tony Stark, or where the timeline has mutated. Could it be that in this timeline, Obadiah isn't going to kill Tony Stark anymore? Are you going to be an individual? Otherwise, why has there been no movement for so long? This is also unreasonable. As the villain of the first film, Obadiah has no reason to suddenly clean up. Otherwise, who would the villain of the first film find? Still in Vanki and Ross, Russia. I don't understand, it's unreasonable. This Obadiah's sudden whitewashing is really a bit unprepared. In the future, you must remember that you must not be superstitious about the plot, and you must pay attention. Close black lens bracket. A paragraph emerged as the end of Luo Chen's diary today, shocking everyone who read the diary. How is it possible? How is it possible? How is it possible? Tony Stark said 3 times in a row, how is it possible? He jumped up from his seat almost all of a sudden. He had indeed doubted Obadiah vaguely, or in other words, just for a moment, such a thought flashed across him. But that was just a passing thought. In fact, he would never have such a thought. Because both of his parents had died since he was a child, and he was only young at that time, it was Obadiah who helped him secure the position of chairman of the company. It stabilized the turbulent Stark industry. During these years, I was responsible for the development and research of new equipment, while Obadiah was responsible for the company's specific operations. It can be said that the two sides cooperated very well. Thanks to Obadiah's support for my hands-off shopkeeper, otherwise Stark Industry would have been in turmoil. It can be said that Stark Industrial Group can have such a scale and market value. He is naturally a core figure and indispensable, but Obadiah has indeed put in a lot of effort over the years. And Obadiah also got what he deserved, Tony Stark's respect, and various business dividends, making his net worth firmly occupy one of the top people in the lighthouse country. It can be said to be a relationship of mutual achievement. Even the flash of suspicion actually came from knowing that he would be kidnapped in Afghanistan. After deduction, he found that Obadiah constantly encouraged him to go to Afghanistan, and he was slightly shaken. But it's just that little bit. Other than that, there's nothing else. He really regarded Obadiah as his own uncle, and even after his father passed away, he almost appeared in his life as a substitute for his father. Unless there is solid evidence, he absolutely does not believe that Obadiah will do this. But now, what is revealed in the diary is ironclad evidence. Because he knew very well that it wasn't an inexplicable mutation in the timeline that caused Obadiah to become a good person and to clean up. It was purely that he saw the diary in advance, and after taking precautions, he refused to go to Afghanistan. Therefore, Obadiah never found a chance to let the colluding warlord attack him, which made Luo Chen very puzzled. Chapter 43 Tony put my uncle in prison. Because of the appearance of the diary, Tony Stark became Iron Man in advance, and in contrast, Obadiah didn't even have a chance to activate it. So far, Obadiah still plays a very good uncle image in front of Tony Stark. Now it is suddenly revealed that he is an evil backstage manipulator. This point makes Tony Stark's 3 views almost explode, and he cannot accept such a thing at all. It was like facing the backstab given to him by his parents. It was extremely uncomfortable. In particular, Tony Stark asked people to check for traitors before, to check whether someone in the army gave his weapons to the warlord leader. Now the answer has surfaced, none other than Obadiah. No wonder those warlords were able to get so many munitions from him, even munitions that were not on the record. It turned out that Obadiah was behind him. It is entirely conceivable how much money Obadiah has made off market through the channels of the Stark Group over the years. The amount of money is not what Tony Stark cares about at all. What he really cares about is his uncle. From today on, he has no elders. So it was him. Tony Stark let out a long breath, slowly learning to accept this. No wonder I couldn't find it no matter how hard I searched. It turned out that the director of our Stark Group sold it personally. Hey. Tony Stark sneered. He was also a decisive capitalist. It was just that he couldn't fully accept it for a while, but now, he can accept it. Since Obadiah betrayed their relationship and even wanted to kill him, Tony Stark naturally would not lack the determination to kill him. JARVIS, mobilize all resources to investigate Obadiah's matter. I want my good uncle to sit in prison. Tony Stark said with a sneer. He will use JARVIS to find out Obadiah's bad things thoroughly, and then send him to prison. As for the sudden death in prison after entering the prison, it is also very reasonable. In what year will the prison in the lighthouse country not die a lot of people? It's normal for an old man to die. Okay, sir. JARVIS said lightly. As Tony Stark's AI smart butler, he wouldn't ask any more questions. Washing white. He didn't clean white. Tony Stark looked at the diary. Luo Chen used whitewashing to describe Obadiah's matter, but couldn't help sneering. Now he looks more and more annoying. Then he looked at other information, Tom Cruise's version of Tony Stark. Although he has known for a long time that there are many versions of Tony Stark, and there may even be more than one film and television version, but it is indeed the first time that he has clearly known Tom Cruise's name. The actor who plays himself outside the fourth wall is Robert Downey Jr., and this is obviously another version of the film and television drama. Although he doesn't know what he looks like, he firmly believes that he is the most handsome. Also, this Vanki. If Obadiah is the villain of the first part of the story series, then this Vanki should be the villain of the second or third part, but I don't know, there will be a few parts of the story, said Tony Stark. But I think it should be very popular, at least dozens of films will be made. Sir, according to the current time interval of Hollywood filming, if you want to make dozens of films, your actors outside the fourth wall must live to be at least 200 years old. JARVIS complained without losing the opportunity. Tony Stark was also a little speechless for a while. He definitely knew what JARVIS said was right, what he said was right, and he couldn't refute it. Normal humans live to be 200 years old, so they are no longer monsters. JARVIS, immediately create a file named Vanki, search for information about this Vanki, find out all possible candidates, slowly screen, tentative scope, Russia Ross. Tony Stark said. Judging from Luo Chen's words, this Vanki may come to the lighthouse country and become my old enemy, so we must monitor all Vankis from Russia. Tony Stark narrowed down the scope of the search. There are too many Russian Ross named Vanki, too many to count, but if they come from Russian Ross, they must come to the lighthouse country, and they have the potential to become their opponents. The scope is limited. A lot. I didn't expect it to be that Opedry. I don't see him as a good person. Hawkeye Barton couldn't help but said. It seems that after Tony Stark got the news, it is imperative to clean up the door. Phil Coulson said. I think Tony Stark should be feeling very uncomfortable now. I guess he never imagined that the biggest traitor is actually his closest relative. It's just another feud between capitalists. Widow sister Natasha Romanoff sneered. I just don't know what choice Tony Stark will make in the end, says. Chapter 44 completely tearing apart, confrontation. This Obadiah matter is nothing, just let Tony Stark handle it. Nick Fury shook his head and said. He couldn't believe Tony Stark couldn't even handle something like that. Pay attention to this Russian man named Vanky. Nick Fury said. Phil Coulson, when the time comes, you should find a way to determine who this Vanky is, so as not to be caught off guard. This person seems to be the old enemy of Tony Stark, who is Iron Man. Maybe it is another super ability super criminal. Thinking of this, Nick Fury only felt that his head was hurting. Before he finished dealing with one, Vanky appeared again, another supervillain. Even if Luo Chen's diary records for today are over, the follow-up has not been updated, and everyone has dispersed. For Luo Chen, sunbathing and work are the daily routine. Since Tony Stark can no longer count on his being kidnapped, Luo Chen naturally can't count on it either. But to his surprise, Tony Stark didn't come to his door. He was also a little strange, because this was not in line with Tony Stark's usual style of doing things, because he saw his true appearance that day, and with Tony Stark's way of doing things, it was absolutely impossible to ignore it. But the reality is like this. Although Luo Chen was strange, he didn't care about it. A few days later, Luo Chen saw related news on TV. That is, there was a drastic equity shift within the Stark Group. The original second-largest shareholder, Opedry, was suddenly exposed to a lot of corruption news, and was even summoned by the New York prosecutor. Everyone was taken away. And the man who came back to take charge was none other than Tony Stark. Immediately afterwards, more news was revealed by the small newspapers. It turned out that Tony Stark made a sudden attack at the shareholder meeting and directly took down Opedry. The raid was completed when no one expected it. Everyone knows that Obadiah and Tony Stark have a good relationship, and they never thought that there would be a day when they would turn against each other. If it was said that ordinary people were just shocked and did not expect Obadiah and Tony Stark to turn against each other, then Luo Chen was completely dumbfounded. He knew that the two sides would definitely turn against each other, but he didn't expect it to be in this form, which was completely different from what he had imagined. Shouldn't the two sides have a big fight? He couldn't understand the timeline of this world more and more. It's getting more and more outrageous. So he decided to be more careful, otherwise it would be hard to say when he would be caught. At the moment, in Tony Stark's mansion in New York, Tony Stark sat down exhausted. Just now he was still dealing with the matter of Opedry. Obadiah was arrested. This matter is really too big, and there are too many things involved. In addition to bringing Obama to justice, he also has to deal with various inquiries and pressures from the government, Congress, and even the market, as well as internal turmoil in the company. He has to deal with it. Send and move the whole body. But these things have to be dealt with. Now Obadiah has become a cancer of the company. If he doesn't deal with it, the whole company will be dragged into hell by him. It can be said that it is physically and mentally exhausting. Suddenly, at this moment, a phone call came. It was a video call. He took a look, and a big face was revealed, which turned out to be Opedry. At the moment Obadiah was wearing a huge amounts of battle armor, and then he was holding a person in his hand, but it was none other than Pepper. Tony, I didn't expect it to be me. Obadiah said with a smirk. Hee, thanks to you, I've had a rough time recently. Obadiah. Tony Stark jumped out of his seat and stood up. What on earth do you want? Tony Stark looked at Obadiah with an extremely gloomy face. It's very simple, I want to get back everything I lost. Obadiah said coldly. Tony, I really didn't expect that you would betray me and send me in with your own hands. Hee, Obadiah, you colluded with the Afghan warlords to kill me, do you think I don't know? Tony Stark sneered. You want to kill me, I just let you sit in prison. I have treated you well enough. I have treated you as my uncle since I was a child. I thought we were a family, but I didn't expect you to want to kill me. A family? Why a family? The Stark Group was founded by me and your father, not just your Stark family. After your father died, I supported the Stark Group by myself, and you did what? Spending time, chasing girls, sleeping with young models, studying for a Ph.D., playing adventure games. Have you ever been in charge of a company? Obadiah said coldly. The indispensable soul of this company is me, not you, Tony Stark. Chapter 45 Obadiah. Tony, you are so naive. Obadiah was very annoyed. Looking at Tony Stark, he thought he could kill Tony Stark quietly, but Tony Stark got the news from nowhere and killed him instead. In a short time, he was locked up directly. But as the top capitalist in the Beacon country, he was not helpless, and finally let him escape. He is a capitalist and has capital all over the world. Now he escapes and can enjoy a good life abroad, but he is not reconciled. He has worked hard all his life, and his contribution is far greater than that of Howard Stark and Tony Stark. Why? As a result, he fled in embarrassment, and he wanted to regain his own wealth. Obadiah, this company belongs to me. Without you, Stark Industries is still Stark Industries. Without me, this company is just a mediocre company. Tony Stark said proudly. Tony, you're still so self-centered. Obadiah said coldly. But I won't talk nonsense to you anymore, your little secretary. You don't have to lie to me if you still want to. I've known you for so long, I know exactly who you care about. Obadiah didn't give Tony Stark a chance to speak at all, and spoke directly. He knew exactly who Tony Stark cared about, or in other words, the people around him who knew and were familiar with Tony Stark knew it well, but Tony Stark and Pepper hadn't realized it yet. It is impossible for a person who thinks he is a playboy to really like someone. And the other thinks that the other party is a playboy. How can he like him, or in other words, can stay by his side with peace of mind, rising from desire to love? But others can actually see clearly that for Tony Stark, Pepper is the most important thing, and many people even think that this is just an ambiguous game played by the two of them. So at this time, he knew who was most useful to catch. What do you want? Tony Stark knew Obadiah could do anything, so he didn't talk nonsense. Because he knew that it was impossible for him to accept the end of losing Pepper. Before, he said to let Jarvis remind himself to strengthen the security of Pepper, but the problem is that it is useless, because the huge armor worn by Obadiah cannot be resisted by the common people at all. And although this battle armor has undergone some modifications, there is no doubt that it is nothing but the prototype design of his own Mark I. Although it is only the design of the prototype, it is no longer comparable to the people of Common. And the manufacturing of the battle armor is obviously not something that can be completed in a short while. That is to say, without his knowledge, Obadiah actually got his design drawings a long time ago, and even quietly manufactured the battle armor. It was only a few days before I realized that I took Obadiah down in one fell swoop, but the problem is that Obadiah has been harboring ill intentions for him for a long time, and he even quietly created such a big battle armor. Killer. Obviously deliberate, not a day or two. It's very simple, I want your nuclear fusion design drawings and materials. Obadiah said viciously. Tony, I have to say that your brain is still very useful. If possible, I don't want to kill you, the golden hen that lays eggs, but your existence has affected our money. Do you understand? It was only at the moment that Tony Stark understood why his own Obadiah uncle suddenly changed from that kind uncle to the man behind the scenes who wanted to kill him. Or because of interests. In the eyes of capitalists, profit is the only thing, and it is very stupid to talk about family and friendship with capitalists. Tony Stark is also a capitalist, but being a capitalist is not his only identity, just like he has always been proud of. Being a capitalist is just his most insignificant identity, and he doesn't even feel that he has much glory. What he is really proud of is a super genius, scientist, charity home, dude. Well, Playboy is also one of his proud identities. After all, being able to sleep with so many beautiful goddesses is not something ordinary people can do. So although Tony Stark is a capitalist, the attributes of a capitalist are not so important. Unlike Obadiah, if he takes off the coat of a capitalist, he may have nothing. But I haven't stopped you from making money, I can even make you more money. Why? Tony Stark asked. Not enough, not enough, you are too principled, you don't sell this, you don't sell that, and that ridiculous insistence, what weapons are used to protect the common people? Obadiah wanted to laugh, some aspects of Tony Stark's innocence left him speechless. Tony, you are too arrogant. Do you think you are really indispensable? Without you, we have enough researchers to develop it as. Chapter 46. Iron Man and Hash-039's first defeat. This is the root cause of Obadiah's willingness to kill Tony Stark. In his opinion, it is true that Tony Stark is very powerful, but so what? Which scientist is not a genius, which researcher is not a super IQ? You are not the only genius in the world. Even if you are a genius, then I can't compare to 1, 10 can be enough, if not, 100, 1,000, 10,000. As long as I have money, I can recruit enough researchers to be compared to you, Tony Stark. There's nothing special about you, Tony Stark, that's the way capitalists always think. Although Tony Stark is a hen that can lay golden eggs, even though in the long run, the existence of Tony Stark is very beneficial to the entire company. But his existence has created huge amounts of conflict with the interests of some shareholders, especially Obadiah himself. Too naive. Isn't it too ironic that a weapon dealer, a death merchant, has such a ridiculous thing as a conscience? But recently, this kind of thinking has been shaken a bit, because he got something new. Tony Stark is actually developing a battle frame. This battle frame gathered the most elite researchers to conduct research when he got the basic design drawing, and I can only study a stupid big black thick. Facts have proved that the existence of some people is indispensable. But at this moment, Tony Stark attacked him, and caught him off guard, but he was not reconciled, and directly took Pepper as a hostage. Tony, you still don't understand how meaningful this nuclear fusion technology is. Obadiah said with a big laugh. When I fully develop this technology, it will completely change the entire energy industry, and I will become the richest man in the world, but you actually used such a great invention for such a boring thing as powering armor. I don't understand the greatness of this technology. Don't look at him being hunted down by the Beacon Country now, but as long as he has this technology, as long as he leaves the Beacon Country, some countries are willing to take him in, such as the Eastern powers, such as Russia, they are not afraid of the Beacon Country. With this technology in hand, the richest man in the world is nothing. That's a lot of money. Anyway, you are a capitalist, where can't you do it? Come to me with the information, otherwise, I can't guarantee her life or death. Obadiah said viciously, and then he hung up the phone. Only Tony Stark was left with an extremely ugly face. Tony Stark said, "Jarvis, how did he get the design drawings of the Mark I? He didn't manufacture the Mark I at all, but only designed the things on the drawings, and then ran it with a virtual AI to test the feasibility. The real finished product will be the Mark II. Sir, he copied the data from your office without your knowledge, and also took away one of the arc reactors you made earlier." Jarvis said bluntly. "In your set permissions, he can enter and leave your office and residential area freely, so I didn't stop him." Tony Stark immediately knew where the problem was. Because he trusted Obadiah too much, he didn't defend at all. Obadiah had the authority to bypass the alarm system and enter directly. And the person who has this authority, besides Pepper, is Obadiah. Tony Stark, who hadn't suspected it before, lost something crucial. It's too late to regret now. No matter how much Jarvis thinks like a human being, and how much he has the ability to think like a human being, his core is still the code, and it is still the underlying code, which cannot be violated. After all, he cannot react autonomously like a human being. If Jarvis were human, the warning would have been raised long ago. Jarvis, get ready to put on the armor, I'm going to save people. Tony Stark said. By the way, Jarvis, create a profile and remind me to build a platform for wearing armor, otherwise it will be too inconvenient to wear. Yes, sir, said Jarvis. After a while, Tony Stark finally put on the armor, and immediately started the flight engine to fly high in the sky. He flew in the direction of the address left by Obadiah, and after a while, he saw Obadiah standing there wearing huge amounts of battle armor. But before Tony Stark could react, the Iron King Obadiah was wearing directly flew over with several missiles. Fast and urgent. Tony Stark didn't even have time to react, and was directly sent flying out. He fell directly to the ground, falling in pieces, and Tony Stark inside felt that the bones on his body were about to break. JARVIS, remind me next time, increase the shock absorber. Tony Stark couldn't help but say. I didn't expect that Obadiah would be so shameless, just come up with a sneak attack. Attack him, a young man in his 30s. Chapter 47. Tony is abused, Luo Chen enters the stage. Tony Stark's Mark II is naturally equipped with shockproof measures, but because of the pursuit of a slim figure, there is not enough space left. This time, he fell heavily from the air, and he was really devastated, and his bones were about to break. Up. But in the next second, a big foot trampled down fiercely. It was none other than Obadiah's Iron Overlord. Tony, you still like to make such flashy toys. Obadiah proudly stepped on the Mark II armor. You do have the ability, but you keep wasting your ability in this kind of place. I am also very embarrassed. Did you bring the information I want? Obadiah doesn't talk nonsense. He knows it's dangerous here because he is still a wanted criminal. Although many people say that in the lighthouse country, rich people can do whatever they want, but in fact they can't really do whatever they want, and there are still some taboos. Even capital can't really do whatever it wants. It can only be said that in most cases, it can do whatever it wants, but when it comes to individuals, it's not so lucky. Basically it's another matter. Force Tony Stark to hand over the information as soon as possible, and then kill him, then the only one left in the world who has mastered nuclear fusion technology. Once this nuclear fusion technology is developed, it can immediately change the pattern of the entire world. The money and reputation he lost on the Stark industry can be recovered in an instant, so there is nothing to regret at all. Don't even think about it. Tony Stark snarled, knocking Obadiah out of the way. The two sides fought together directly, and Pepper, who had been grabbed by the side, had already started to run away in a hurry. She wasn't stupid and sweet, so naturally she couldn't stay where she was at this time and leave herself to Obadiah as a threat. As for Obadiah, he didn't care about Pepper at all. Anyway, she was just a tool to attract Tony Stark. Now that Tony Stark arrived, it was fine. It's really overpowering, Obadiah said with a sneer. You are as stubborn as your dead dad, but it's useless. People like you just have a higher IQ than the average person. Do you really think you are a big shot? Ha! Obadiah was constantly launching an attack. Compared with Tony Stark's full version of the Mark II, he, the Iron Tyrant, was somewhat stupid. In contrast, Mark II is much more handsome. But when it comes to fighting, being handsome is not enough for food. Almost crushed Tony Stark from the ground up. Tony Stark was about to start the engine and fly into the sky almost immediately, but Obadiah would not give him this chance. A stride came up to him, and then pulled him down, threw him to the ground, and threw Tony Stark directly dazed. Tony Stark was about to vomit blood. Although he had known for a long time that a small body was too disadvantageous for a large body, it was like a person who was 1.6 meters tall, but no matter how fancy he practiced, a person who was 2 meters tall could easily crush the opponent. This is the essential gap, and it cannot be reversed by fancy moves. He has thought about making a large mech to fight against the gigantic green Titan Hulk and the Abomination. But he only had this kind of cognition. In fact, he didn't really experience the terrifying pressure of facing a big man. Now he felt it, the first time he really felt how outrageous it was. Although the silly big black thick is not good looking, but it is really strong. Tony, see if I don't grab you out of that turtle shell. Obadiah said, laughing. He felt that he had never been so happy in his life, and the anger of the past few days finally vented completely, and he stomped Tony Stark to the ground, which was really cool. Tony Stark almost vomited blood with every foot he stepped down. Mark II began to be covered with cracks. Seeing that Tony Stark was about to be beaten to death by Obadiah. Suddenly, a clear and slightly joking voice came. Ah, isn't this our Iron Man, Tony Stark? When Tony Stark heard it, he immediately lifted his spirits, because he recognized that this is not that Luo Chen. Why is he here at this time? He didn't hear it wrong, and it wasn't a hallucination. It was Luo Chen who came here after hearing the news. He's not monitoring Tony Stark, it's just that he has super hearing, and sometimes he will hear something, but usually he deliberately controls it, otherwise, there will be too much information, and people's brains will blow up. Need help? Luo Chen in casual clothes asked while flying in midair. Definitely need it. Tony Stark said hastily. At the moment he didn't care about the self-esteem and pride of a super genius. If it goes on like this, it will be dead. 10 million, as long as you help me this time, I will give you 10 million. Chapter 48 One Punch Superman, Luo Chen. At the critical moment, Tony Stark remembered that in the diary, Luo Chen repeatedly stated that he wanted to make money, and even used his kidnapping to make money. It shows that Luo Chen wants to make money very much, and he cannot be said to be greedy for money. After all, Luo Chen has the current strength, but he has not used this strength to do evil and obtain excess benefits. Not becoming what he calls a super criminal is already rare. But he must still love money, and he still loves money very much. $10 million. Luo Chen's eyes lit up. He wanted to use the kidnapping of Tony Stark to make a fortune, which was around $10 million. Now he has directly obtained tens of millions. Sure enough, the best money in this world is money from robbery. He didn't doubt that Tony Stark would lie to him, because there was no need. That's right, it's $10 million. Tony Stark said, resisting the severe pain in his body. That's good, leave this matter to me. Luo Chen said with a grin. Where did the bedbug come from? You're looking for death. Obadiah looked at Luo Chen coldly, and he immediately launched an attack, punching Luo Chen in an instant. With this punch, even an elephant will be smashed to the ground. But in the next second, he opened his eyes wide, because he saw that when his fist of controlling the Iron Overlord hit Luo Chen actually stretched out a finger, and directly blocked the terrifying punch hit. There was a sound like gold and iron colliding. There was no fluctuation in this terrifying blow. Iron Overlord is still unattractive as always. Luo Chen said with a smile. Have you ever heard a saying that whether you are strong or not is only temporary and will change with the iteration of the version, but whether you are handsome or not is for a lifetime? Forget it, I have no common language with an ugly guy like you. It was too late and then too soon. Luo Chen made a move, and he arrived in front of Obadiah without hesitation. You're looking for death. Obadiah was furious. Although he was immediately surrounded by Luo Chen's words, he knew very well that what Luo Chen meant was to mock him. How dare you call him ugly? It's unbearable. Another punch hit Luo Chen's head. But Luo Chen just unhurriedly made a fist with the same 5 fingers, and punched him. There was a huge amount of roar, and along with Obadiah's scream, the entire arm of the Iron Overlord exploded directly, and the arm made of high-energy alloy could not stop Luo Chen's punch now. Immediately afterwards, Luo Chen didn't waste any time, and another lightning-like punch directly hit the Iron Overlord's stomach, and unexpectedly pierced Iron Overlord's stomach. The entire Iron Tyrant's incomparably huge body also began to fall apart, and Obadiah, who was in it, was directly punched to death. The Iron Overlord, who had tortured Tony Stark to death just now, was punched to death by Luo Chen as if he had met his nemesis. Tony Stark was dumbfounded. Although he had already estimated Luo Chen's strength, he also tried to build a file about Luo Chen's strength. From the analysis of various information, Luo Chen is very strong, but none of them are as shocking as the scene before him. To be precise, he was completely dumbfounded. How terrifying and difficult the Iron Overlord was, he knew very well that he was basically rendered powerless by the Iron Overlord just now. He used the battle armor to magnify his own strength, but in terms of strength, the Iron Overlord will only be stronger than him, and in terms of speed, the Iron Overlord is not slow at all. It can be said that he seems to have met his nemesis. His light armor cannot be compared with a heavy armor like Iron Overlord in a head-to-head duel. However, he has no intention of changing the armor style. After all, he agrees with Luo Chen's words, whether it is strong or not is only temporary, and he can constantly upgrade the armor in the future to continuously improve the strength of his own armor. But whether you are handsome or not is a big deal in your life. After the big deal, a large armor will be specially made to fight against these big guys. Tony Stark first came up with the idea of making a dedicated anti-series armor. But no matter what, this punch can crush the Iron Overlord, and disintegrate the Iron Overlord, which is beyond the highest level of strength he estimated for Luo Chen. And judging by Luo Chen's appearance, it was obvious that he hadn't used all his strength yet. Just the combat power displayed so far has already frightened a person to death. He has already started to have a headache. If he becomes Luo Chen's enemy in the future, how will he fight against such a monster-level existence? Is there any alloy in this world that can withstand his punch? I'm afraid it's gone. This Luo Chen has evolved to such an inhuman level in the short time since he came to this world through so-called time travel, but he still clings on, worrying about the future crisis. So what happened in the future that could make this non-human pervert so worried? This is Chapter 49. I am Iron Man. From Luo Chen's strong strength, Tony Stark can see the many crises that he will face in the future, and he can see a little bit of the tip of the iceberg. Just the tip of the iceberg made Tony Stark, who had a strong sense of crisis, and maybe even a bit of paranoia of persecution, feel very anxious. It's over. Luo Chen smiled slightly. This punch really showed his strength. And as Tony Stark thought, Luo Chen did have enough strength, and this punch could not fully demonstrate his strength. Definitely, Luo Chen himself was very satisfied. After all, he was really handsome, and he finished Opedy with one punch. Opedry's Iron King is only at the level of the Mark I, which is still at the level of the first-generation machine. In fact, Tony Stark's Mark II at this stage is actually not too far behind, and it can't stand Luo Chen's punch. He's a one-punch Superman. Thank you for today, Tony Stark said. The last time we said goodbye, you didn't tell me your name. You can tell me this time, otherwise my $10 million won't be able to be transferred to your card. Tony Stark barely stood up. The armor on his body was shapeshifting, and it was very uncomfortable for him to get stuck. Luo Chen thought for a while, since he took care of this nosy business, and Opedry was beaten to death by him, then there is probably no way to avoid dealing with Tony Stark. Whether he is willing or not, there is no way to avoid getting involved in the plot. That being the case, it is better to get to know each other generously. My name is Luo Chen. I think you should be able to find my information, including my bank card. You can just type in it when the time comes. It's getting late today, so I'm leaving. Luo Chen said directly. He finally understood why Tony Stark, who was so suspicious, didn't check him out after seeing the fact that he was able to fly. It turned out that they were all dealing with Obadiah. Although he didn't know why the timeline was distorted and changed like this. However, judging from today's events, it seems that the timeline is still amazingly repairable. Although there have been a lot of changes in the middle, Tony Stark has become Iron Man after all, and he still has a tearful relationship with Obadiah. You can deal with the rest, don't expose my information, I don't want to be harassed by others. After finishing speaking, Luo Chen no longer hesitated, rose straight from the ground, and disappeared into the sky. And at the moment, seeing the little pepper at the end of the battle, he ran over quickly, looked at Tony Stark and said in a panic, "Tony, are you okay?" "I'm fine," Tony Stark said with a grin. He almost overturned his car today and was beaten to death by Obadiah. If it wasn't for Luo Chen, he would be finished today. This also made Tony Stark realize for the first time that the so-called protagonist of the story is not so easy to be. Even if he was originally one of the protagonists in a series of stories, he may still encounter various risks and may still overturn. For example, today's situation. This greatly relieved the arrogance in his heart. He is not invincible, nor is he omnipotent. He still needs to figure out his own strength. He may just be the protagonist in a certain story, but he is not a god and cannot be omnipotent. You can't do this next time, Pepper said reproachfully. But you've been tinkering with this mysteriously all this time. Pepper remembered that Tony Stark was away from work all day long, regardless of the group's affairs, and even didn't see anyone all day long. Even Tony Stark's favorite sex session was omitted. During this time, he didn't find those supermodels or female stars, and didn't let her deal with these funeral affairs. It's so out of character, it's not Tony Stark's style at all. Well now, the truth is out, if there is something that attracts men more than women, it must be Gundam. Although this is not Gundam, it is essentially a class of things. Yes, Tony Stark said, nodding. Call Happy to come over and pack up the things here. All defective parts must be taken away, and they cannot be left behind. Even the Iron Overlord was modified according to the design drawings of his Mark I, which was all his Tony Stark's technology. If it was lost, it would be equivalent to his technology being lost, which would definitely be disadvantageous. Understood. Pepper immediately calmed down, and began to call Happy, and the professional security team under Stark Industries came to deal with this matter. But how do you plan to deal with the next thing? I think it's hard to hide this time. Pepper said. After all, Obadiah is dead. Pepper never imagined that Obadiah still had this kind of ability, and now his death will undoubtedly be a big event. Then don't hide it. After all, I am Iron Man. Tony Stark said with a determined face. This is Chapter 50. The opening of a new era. The truth is, I am Iron Man. Watching the scene on TV where Tony Stark publicly declared that he was Iron Man at the press conference, Luo Chen was filled with emotion. It's definitely not the first time he's seen this scene, he's seen it more than once in the movie. But this time is different, he actually saw Tony Stark's speech on real TV. Although the experience was not exactly the same as in the previous life, Tony Stark still made the same choice. What does this mean? Character determines destiny. Tony Stark's character is like this, he has his own pride, and that kind of hiding his head and showing his tail style of doing things is not acceptable to him. That's why there is something about admitting that he is Iron Man. This is the difference between Tony Stark and others. Others are also rich and become superheroes, and Batman has not publicly admitted that he is Bruce Wayne. Superman has to wear metaphysical glasses to hide his identity. Tony Stark's pride can be imagined. But Luo Chen can't control so much, anyway, Tony Stark can do as long as he wants. Being public has the benefits of being public, and hiding one's identity is also good for hiding it. This can be regarded as a scene of legendary. Luo Chen was a little stunned, feeling that he came to this world, maybe to witness some great moments, and now he witnessed it, but he didn't have the excitement of the first time. Maybe because of this period of time, his strength has improved amazingly, and his mentality is also undergoing a change that he doesn't know. Anyway, nothing to do, it is better to write a diary. The truth is, I am Iron Man. No one thought that this sentence opened up what a glorious era, started with this sentence, and ended with this sentence. Since then, whether it is the retirement of the older generation or the new generation, no matter how helpless you are, that era is finally over. Close black lens bracket. Inside the mansion in New York, Tony Stark breathed a sigh of relief after getting rid of those annoying reporters. The matter of Obadiah has been completely over so far. The internal liquidation of such a behemoth as Stark Industries would have attracted the attention of all parties. The Congress, the government, the military, and all kinds of calls were about to explode. What's more, Obadiah is still dead, which is even more difficult. A top capitalist died without any explanation, and the exchange of various interests also made him feel somewhat tired. During this turmoil in the Stark industry, he still has to try his best to protect his own territory and prevent other capitalists who are staring at him from eating him alive. This is the world of capital, there is no favor, everything is profit. At the previous press conference, he rejected the draft written by the military and announced in public that I am Iron Man. All of a sudden, a huge wave was set off. Public opinion in the entire Beacon country, and even the entire world, has been blown up. In fact, there will be such a press conference, but also because of the battle between Tony Stark and Obadiah, some clips were filmed. The two robots are fighting, which is not a blockbuster with special effects. This matter naturally aroused the attention of countless people immediately. I couldn't hide it if I wanted to, and I even photographed more than one or two people. Although I was far away at the time, I still vaguely captured some battle scenes. At the same time, Pepper was also photographed. From this breakthrough point, he was caught on Tony Stark. Not to mention, there will be a security team under Stark Industries afterwards, which is directly confirmed. At that time, besides Pepper, there was also Luo Chen, but it was strange that no matter who took the picture, Luo Chen looked like a mosaic, as if the picture was distorted by something same. Tony Stark naturally knew that this was because Luo Chen was still unwilling to appear in the public's view, using that unique force field to distort the surrounding air to a certain extent, forming a mosaic effect. People who see it with their own eyes may not be affected much, but if you want to shoot something, you will find that a mosaic is automatically formed. So in the end Tony Stark had to deal with these things, and everyone around him advised him not to reveal his identity, just say that he was his company's bodyguard. Anyway, no one really took pictures of the person in the armor. Who is it? Although the reporters are not fools, they can still fool them without real evidence. However, Tony Stark chose to disclose his identity. He is Iron Man Tony Stark, and he is also a playboy, a super genius, a super inventor, a super rich man, and a super philanthropist. Every layer of identity is him, he has nothing to hide, and he doesn't bother to hide it. The pride in Tony Stark's heart is so far, one can imagine. Now the most troublesome thing is over, and the rest is to deal with the follow-up trivial matters. I am Iron Man, good opening remarks, but, do you think you are the only superhero in this world?
Chapter 51. Iron Man and Braised Egghead finally meet. I am Iron Man, good opening remarks, but, do you think you are the only superhero in this world? Suddenly, a slightly mocking voice came from the other side of the living room. Tony Stark was startled, looked towards the living room in the darkness, and said, "Jarvis, turn on the light." Following Tony Stark's order, the lights in the hall were turned on one after another. Immediately afterwards, he saw a black braised egg in a black leather jacket with his back turned to him, and slowly turned around. "Boiled egg head." Tony Stark blurted out, "Isn't this the same braised egg head mentioned in Luo Chen's diary?" He suddenly felt that Luo Chen's description in Japan is really appropriate. This is not a braised egg head, so what is a braised egg head? Hearing this, Nick Fury's mood of pretending to be aggressive was completely destroyed in an instant. This Tony Stark, really, is as venomous and rude as the intelligence profile says. How can you call someone a braised egg head when you come up? Are you polite? Are you polite? You are not polite at all. Nick Fury wants to complain, wants to get angry. But he suddenly remembered, isn't this what Luo Chen called him in his diary? This also reflects that Tony Stark must have a copy of the journal in his hand. Damn security system. Tony Stark immediately reacted. Seeing Nick Fury appearing directly in his house, Tony Stark felt a huge sense of crisis for the first time. The reason is simple, because Tony Stark was first invaded by Obadiah, stole the design of the Mark I and the first-generation arc reactor, and then was invaded by this braised egg head. The security of my own home has been infiltrated like a sieve, allowing others to come and go. That's fine with Obadiah, it's his own authority, so it can be done without anyone noticing. But how did this marinated egghead do it, so that Jarvis didn't even react? If he wanted to harm himself, wouldn't he be dead now? After all, he is just a common man without his battle armor. How can a common man stop a guy of unknown origin? Relax, I'm not your enemy, Tony Stark. Nick Fury said directly. Who are you? Tony Stark immediately asked warily. My name is Nick Fury. Nick Fury said directly. You must have seen my name in the diary. It really is you. Tony Stark immediately realized, isn't this the braised egg head mentioned in the diary? And judging from what Nick Fury said, I'm afraid that the diary is really not unique to him, that is to say, what he can see, others can also see. This immediately made him feel like the secret in his heart was being pried into. It seems that you should know something about me, so I don't need to say anything. Nick Fury said with a smile. The director of S.H.I.E.L.D., I know. Tony Stark said, his vigilance relaxed a little. Because judging from the diary, this Nick Fury, this S.H.I.E.L.D. is likely to become a comrade in arms in the future, that is to say, they are likely to be friends, not enemies. With this understanding, it will be easy to talk about the following things. Nick Fury said with a smile. I am the current director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I am also one of the important forces responsible for maintaining peace in this world. Maintain world peace. Why haven't I heard about you? Tony Stark said directly. I asked Jarvis to search for news about you on the internet, but there is basically nothing. What kind of organization are you? It's very simple, because all you can search is the information of the Watch world. The truth of this world is not above the Watch world, so it's normal for you not to know. Nick Fury said. Actually, you didn't find nothing. In fact, many of the things you found were affiliated organizations of our S.H.I.E.L.D. It's just that they didn't know that they were affiliated organizations of our S.H.I.E.L.D. As Nick Fury said, He walked to a table beside him and poured himself a glass of XO, which was not polite at all. Seeing this scene, Tony Stark's eyelids twitched. He has always been so arrogant. Unexpectedly, now there are people who are more arrogant than him. Really enlightened now. Your organization looks amazing. You can still pretend to be the FBI and CIA. You haven't been killed yet. You must have some skills. Thinking of this, Tony Stark came to the table and poured himself a glass of wine. He took a sip and said, "Also, how did you break through my security system and enter here? I really don't like your attitude of visiting. Do you really think I have no temper? Don't think that you are some kind of mysterious organization. I will take you for nothing. There is a way." Chapter 52 Invitation to join the Avengers Alliance. Tony Stark was also on fire. The security system he thought was safe was breached twice in a short period of time. Twice. Do you know how he came here these days? Especially when this braised egghead walked in front of him so arrogantly, even though it might not seem hostile, it already made Tony Stark very upset. How should I put it? No matter what, we are still an agent organization, and we always have some means that others don't have. Nick Fury smiled slightly and spoke. What is he going to say? Could it be that I cut off the power to your house while you were away, and then walked in? High-end agent sneaking method, just use the simplest method. Definitely, things won't be that simple. A huge villa naturally has its own backup electricity, but that short period of time is enough for Nick Fury to do a lot of things. Don't pay attention to the details. Nick Fury said. HMPH. Tony Stark sneered twice, making up his mind to solve the security problem of this house. Otherwise everyone could come here for a walk. It's simply too outrageous. Then what are you going to do with me? What shield is asking me to join you? It is, but it's not. Nick Fury said directly. Let me introduce our shield to you first. Our shield is an intelligence organization established by the 5 major countries of the United Nations. Didn't he get killed because of his identity? It's because the government of the lighthouse country is also one of our bosses. 5 major countries join forces. Tony Stark raised his brows and said, "It's a big deal. No wonder you are so arrogant. You dare to break into private houses. According to the law of the lighthouse country, I am not guilty of killing you now, do you know?" Nick Fury didn't answer either, because he knew that this was Tony Stark venting his anger. But the 5 major countries all have their own intelligence organizations, so why do you have to be there? Tony Stark asked, a bit puzzled. He is also very curious. He definitely knows that the 5 major countries are the nominal and actual masters of this planet. It can be said that if the 5 major countries are the masters of countless creatures in this world, they can't be said to be friendly with each other. At least they are one infighting. It's not easy to get them to cooperate a little bit, let alone 5 of them teaming up to establish an intelligence organization. Definitely for a reason. Nick Fury said. Because we specialize in dealing with many things that ordinary intelligence organizations cannot handle, to protect the safety of common humans on Earth. Protect common humans. Tony Stark squinted his eyes. This intention was much higher than that of ordinary intelligence organizations. What kind of things do you have to deal with? Such as werewolves, vampires, aliens, witches, aliens, or some monsters who ran away from experiments and so on. Nick Fury said. There are also some extremists who are the most difficult to deal with. Anyway, they are not things that ordinary people need to deal with. There are werewolves, vampires. Tony Stark was also a little shocked, because although he knew the existence of the Green Titan Hulk, after seeing the abomination and the military's intervention, he naturally understood that it was purely the result of scientific experiment mutation. Generally speaking, it can be regarded as the category of science. Definitely, more are from the records in Luo Chen's notes, but Luo Chen is a traverser from beyond the 4th wall. It was the first time he heard the native Aborigines say that. Definitely there are. These existences have existed since ancient times, and these dark sides are much more terrifying than you can imagine. Nick Fury said after taking a sip of his wine. The reason why you don't know is because to us, you are only common people, and we will keep the dark side out of common people's lives. Sounds pretty great. Tony Stark joked. He definitely wouldn't believe it completely. As long as it was mentioned in Luo Chen's diary, he could have this level of trust now. Judging from the settings given to them by the screenwriters outside the fourth wall, it seems that they are not bad guys. Otherwise, Tony Stark is not a naive kid. How could it be possible that Nick Fury believed whatever he said? Then since you are so great, why do you want a common man like me? Tony Stark put an accent on the three words common, obviously very dissatisfied with Nick Fury's statement that he was only a common man. Who is he? He is Tony Stark, super genius, super scientist, super philanthropist, super rich, super big shot, Iron Man. Is he from common? Because, I would like to invite you to join an extraordinary organization I am planning to form recently, called Avengers. Nick Fury said firmly. Revenge for what? Tony Stark frowned and said with a deliberate sneer. Sorry, I'm not interested in joining your Superboy group. Nick Fury was not moved by Tony Stark's rejection, but said, this is not a combination of Superboys, this is a combination specially designed to deal with some superhumans who are not easy to deal with, or super monsters, it is more terrifying than what we have dealt with before, werewolves and vampires. For example, the ones mentioned in Luo Chen's diary. Tony Stark said directly without beating around the bush. Now that Nick Fury has mentioned the diary, it is obvious that he also has a diary in his hand, so naturally he can't hide it. Even Nick Fury guessed that he had a diary in his hand, and even came prepared. In this case, it's not very interesting to go around again. Yes. Nick Fury said directly, since he decided to let Tony Stark join the Superboys, it was Avengers' plan, so many secrets would be open to Tony Stark. After reading the diary, you must have some idea of his origin. That's right, I know. His origin is some kind of time traveler, a common person in the universe beyond the fourth wall. Tony Stark said. Then you should have guessed it. In Luo Chen's writing, we are all just NPC characters in the series of stories. Nick Fury continued. Hey, that's you, I'm not an NPC character, I'm the protagonist, do you understand the protagonist? Tony Stark retorted immediately. Do you understand the gold content of the protagonist? Nick Fury is also a little speechless. This Tony Stark is really not the usual arrogance, not the usual narcissism and shamelessness. Even if he is a character written by someone else, Tony Stark is different from ordinary people. He is a real protagonist. How is he different from you supporting characters? I couldn't accept it at first, but after a long time, I really believed his words. Tony Stark said with a self-deprecating smile, his mouth twitching. When he first knew that he was just a fictional character, his will almost collapsed. He even indulged himself too much, making himself even more luscious than before. It was not until a few days later that he finally regained some of his true heart. Regardless of whether he is a fiction written by others, or as Jarvis comforted himself, it may be that his story, this universe, was projected into the mind of the screenwriter outside the fourth wall. Tony Stark is Tony Stark, not a cat or a dog. Things are like this now, and Tony Stark is definitely not a character that other people can control. Luo Chen's diary records a lot of disasters. Although many of them are still incomprehensible, he really likes to use some memes to refer to them. Nick Fury said. Tony Stark nodded. He agreed with this very much in his heart. This Luo Chen, there are many and dense rotten memes, but he couldn't directly mention the matter of this diary with Luo Chen, so many things can only be ignored guess. There are too many various crises mentioned in his diary, so in order to deal with these crises, I set up a small team called Avengers to deal with things that ordinary people can't handle. For example, your Uncle Obadiah. It's the same as other things, such a large armor is enough to force a single person to push a company of the US Army horizontally. Nick Fury said. Tony Stark thought about it, and it was indeed the case. Don't think that the Iron King is just the first-generation machine designed by him, it's just the Mark I. But in fact, in terms of combat power, I'm afraid it is still higher than the Mark II and Mark III that he wears now and will design in the future. Because the design ideas are different from the beginning. Many crises cannot be handled by you alone. For example, you were almost killed by your Uncle Obadiah. If it weren't for the help of a mysterious person, you may have a big accident. Exclamation mark. Nick Fury said directly. That mysterious person, according to the video we obtained afterwards and other information, is likely to be a street superhero who has recently gained fame, Superman. These are news that are difficult for you to obtain alone, because we have the support of intelligence agencies all over the world, which is much better than you alone, even if you have an artificial intelligence assistant, but it's impossible to compare with our team organization. Nick Fury said, trying to convince Tony Stark. Hearing this, Tony Stark showed a playful smile, and said, "It seems that you don't know who this Superman is." Chapter 54 Identity Exposure, Luo Chen is Superman. Tony Stark found that it seems that the people in S.H.I.E.L.D. still don't know that the Superman is Luo Chen originally. This is very interesting, and this can be regarded as his unique information. But on the other hand, S.H.I.E.L.D. really doesn't know everything, and their intelligence network also has blind spots. But this is also because before he saw Luo Chen flying in the air with his own eyes, he never imagined that he actually had this ability. Luo Chen didn't even write all of this in his diary. For example, he just said in general that he met Tony Stark while basking in the sun, but he didn't say that he met Tony Stark above the clouds, in the sky. It's pretty cunning. Serious people who really write the truth in the diary. This is the case with Luo Chen, so this creates a kind of blind spot in the application form. Except for Tony Stark, everyone thought that Luo Chen was just an ordinary time traveler. If it wasn't for the protection of this diary, he might have been captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. long ago. So you know that. Nick Fury said, looking at Tony Stark. In fact, that's the real reason he came to Tony Stark. Because they photographed Obadiah's death, it was not Tony Stark, and this is why S.H.I.E.L.D. knows more than the average person. Most people only know that Obadiah's Iron Bully and Tony Stark's Mark II are fighting. Although they don't know the specific model, they think it is the result of the fight between these two people. But Nick Fury knew it wasn't Tony Stark's solution. That's another thing we asked you for. I want to know who this Superman is. Nick Fury said. If possible, I also want to put him in this Avengers. S.H.I.E.L.D. is also very interested in the sudden emergence of Superman, trying to check his identity everywhere, but with little success. However, considering the blowout of superheroes and supercriminals mentioned in Luo Chen's diary, it seems that there is nothing strange about it. This is just another blowout superhero. Ha 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 ha, you can't do it. Tony Stark said, laughing. Why? Nick Fury said, frowning. Is there any other hidden secret? Tony Stark took a sip of wine, then put down his glass, and said, because he is Luo Chen, you can't pull him into Avengers, and you can't even reveal the existence of the diary to him, right? Nick Fury suddenly turned pale with shock. This expression made Tony Stark very satisfied, because since Nick Fury came in, he always looked like he was sure of winning. There was even a feeling of superiority, which made Tony Stark, who had always taken the initiative, dissatisfied, or in other words, very, very dissatisfied. So he had to sap Nick Fury hard, and it worked. Ha 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 ha. Tony Stark laughed wildly like a child who had achieved a prank. You're lying to me, he's just a common, how could he be Superman? At the moment Nick Fury immediately turned around and said. You should also be clear that he just crossed over from the outside. He can't have super abilities. Or, judging from his diary, it's impossible for the universe beyond the fourth wall to have Superman class. Nick Fury seriously. But have you noticed that one day, Luo Chen once mentioned a joke in his diary, saying that the rich rely on technology, and the poor rely on mutation? Tony Stark said. Nick Fury nodded. He definitely remembered that this was a sentence that Luo Chen accidentally wrote in his diary in a joking tone some time ago. This sentence, it is completely obvious that it is a joke. Later, according to the analysis in S.H.I.E.L.D., it was analyzed that it is very likely that this refers to superhero, or the source of super criminals obtaining Superman-like ability beyond common people, and those who have money may rely on technology to solve it. For example, the Mark armor made by Tony Stark, and what the poor don't have the money to do, it depends on mutation. And this mutation is not an ordinary mutation, but a mutation similar to Spider-Man or Spider-Woman. Obviously, both of them are directly related to spiders. Obviously, there are no spider genes in human genes. There must be other reasons that lead to some kind of mutation. You mean he's mutated too? Nick Fury immediately realized what Tony Stark was trying to say. Luo Chen is just a traveler from outside, and he has no money, no connections, and he doesn't seem to have super knowledge, so there is only one way left, which is mutation. Yes, although I don't know the source of his ability, but he should be mutated. Tony Stark said with great certainty. He mentioned in his diary the day that he met me while basking in the sun. Do you know where he met me? On the clouds. Chapter 55. The poor rely on mutation, the rich rely on technology, and Luo Chen relies on cheating. Nick Fury finally realized the problem. He said, but Luo Chen never said this in the diary. You mean, he consciously controlled the information and didn't show it in the diary, or he knew our existence, deliberately to mislead us? Tony Stark glanced at Nick Fury, and then said, if you think that way, then you're thinking too much. It's just that no normal person keeps a diary, and who is a decent person would write the truth in a diary? Haven't you found out? He hardly has any rules in his diary, and he doesn't care about what he writes. In many cases, it's just like a simple check-in situation. But even so, he never stopped a day, even if he just said something said, what was the weather like that day, how he waited for me to be kidnapped, and then made a lot of money from it. Tony Stark continued to explain. In addition to our diary, I don't know what you are like, but this one in my hand suddenly appeared in my hand. The material is unknown, and words will appear. Originally it is very strange simple. So my personal speculation is that this diary may be a kind of check-in system, and he must rely on this check-in for a living, or maybe this is how he can survive in this world. Tony Stark said. Don't you think it's strange? Sometimes, it's still in the morning, but he has already finished writing the diary for the day. Is this normal? You mean, it's some kind of life support device that keeps him alive in our world? Nick Fury said, frowning. It is possible. Tony Stark nodded, and then said, otherwise, many things can't be explained. For example, at the beginning, the time he recorded the diary was obviously strange. Have you ever seen someone who wakes up early in the morning to write a diary? Even if there are some diary habits in the world outside the fourth wall, but according to the habits of normal human beings, it doesn't matter whether you write a diary or not. It's just such a boring thing as the weather of the day. He has shown unprecedented enthusiasm for writing a diary, so I doubt whether writing a diary is the reason why he can travel through and live in our world. He will return to the original world. Tony Stark said. So the real magic is not Luo Chen, but this diary, which may be God's creation or something else, but I think, no matter what its nature is, I won't be surprised. Nick Fury frowned. What Tony Stark said was not impossible, but very possible. This also fit perfectly with some psychologists' psychological profiling of Luo Chen. Some things that could not be explained before can now be explained. The explanation worked out. For example, why Luo Chen is so active in writing a diary and writes such boring things. The two are originally very contradictory. Later, his diary writing attitude was obviously a lot more perfunctory, not as positive as it was at the beginning. This, from the time he wrote the diary, from the early morning most of the time, began to become more and more random. It has to do with getting later. Tony Stark said. This may have something to do with him adapting to this fear. I think this may be his psychological process, from extreme fear at the beginning to getting used to it later. This is also the process of psychological adaptation for ordinary people. In the face of unexpected situations, from extreme panic to slowly adapting. Nick Fury nodded and said, "Your analysis is very reasonable, but it has nothing to do with his what is the relationship with his ability. What kind of mutation do you think his ability came from? Is it related to time travel? Probably not. Since he is from the outside world, according to our analysis, our world is in their world. It may be a series of stories, it may be a film and television drama, it may be anime, it may be manga, or it may be fiction, then there are likely to be some adventures. Isn't it a typical Hollywood story structure?" Tony Stark said. "Have you watched The Lord of the Rings? I have also fantasized that if I can be in the world, maybe I can cut off some adventures in advance and make myself very powerful, and I think this is what Luo Chen said in the short story. The reason for the sudden increase in time. You mean, he became stronger because he cut off some other people's opportunities in advance?" Nick Fury immediately understood what Tony Stark was trying to express. "I think it should be like this, at least from his perspective, it shouldn't be difficult," Tony Stark said. "So his suddenness is strong, and I think that's the reason. Maybe he made fun of it himself. Poor people rely on mutation. Obviously, he succeeded in mutation. If Luo Chen himself were here, he would be shocked to hear the analysis of Tony Stark and Nick Fury. These two top smart people can analyze so many things with just a few words. It can be said to be very close to the truth. It can be said that if the truth is 100 steps away from them, they are now more than 90 steps away, but the remaining 10 steps are the key. They think that the poor rely on mutation and the rich rely on technology, so Luo Chen should also rely on mutation. In fact, Luo Chen does not rely on mutation at all, he relies on hacking. You definitely can't deduce it with ordinary logic by relying on cheating. This is why Tony Stark and Nick Fury, two smart people, can guess a lot of things, but they make mistakes at critical times. Because they are missing the most critical information. He has the advantage of information that we can't imagine, and this advantage can help him go far, far in terms of personal strength. Tony Stark said, with a serious look on his face. He is a person with a great sense of crisis, and even has a bit of persecution paranoia. Luo Chen, as an outsider, even though he looks normal at the moment, is a sunny and cheerful boy. But what about the future? What will the future look like? When he possesses extremely powerful power, will he still be the same as before? The most important thing is that they can hardly stop Luo Chen from becoming stronger. It is almost a matter of time before he becomes stronger. He can have too many adventures to choose his own growth path. For example, inexplicably in just a few months, he possessed the ability, which can be regarded as the pinnacle of human industrial wisdom among the Iron Overlords. Such a person will definitely become stronger and stronger in the future, and will become an unstable Sonic, even if Luo Chen has not shown any relevant tendencies at present. But the mere possibility of that was enough to give Tony Stark a headache. This is indeed a problem. Nick Fury nodded and said. The protection mechanism behind Luo Chen made their SHIELD's long-term wooing policy useless. Even they can't contact Luo Chen directly, or to confess to him something related to the diary, they can only guess here. But for now, he's still a pretty good guy, and we still have a chance to influence him so that he doesn't become a super criminal. Tony Stark said. Isn't he now a so-called Superman, a street hero? This shows that originally is a good sign, as long as we don't influence and change everything. Anyway, regarding his question, I think we need to cooperate. If there is information and intelligence, I hope we can share it together, especially to deal with the increasingly terrifying world in the future. Nick Fury said seriously. Okay. Tony Stark thought about it, and that's exactly what he wanted to do. Also, I can seriously consider your Superboy combination. Tony Stark realizes that going it alone might not be the right thing to do in the future, especially if you're up against hordes of super criminals. For example, he was almost defeated in the battle with Obadiah. Even if he thought he was a super child of destiny, it was useless. I'll say it again, that's not a Superboy group, that's called Revenge and Alliance. Nick Fury said with black lines all over his face. Suddenly, the voice of Jarvis suddenly appeared. Sir, I have to remind you that Luo Chen's diary has been updated. Tony Stark frowned, while Nick Fury said, you shouldn't mind if I look at your diary at the same time, I think our diary should be the same. Tony Stark thought about it, and agreed right away. The two then looked at this copy of Tony Stark's diary. The truth is, I am Iron Man. No one thought that this sentence opened up what a glorious era, started with this sentence, and ended with this sentence. Since then, whether it is the retirement of the older generation or the new generation, no matter how helpless you are, that era is finally over. Close black lens bracket. It seems that his evaluation of you is still very high as before, and he thinks that your opening remarks have opened up an entire era. Nick Fury said. But in the end, it will also end with this sentence. What kind of vulgar stock is this? Can't these Hollywood screenwriters think of other endings? Tony Stark said with a curl of his lips. A stretched shot, which shows me with white hair, and then says to the distance, I am Iron Man, and then the shot gets farther and farther away, symbolizing the retirement of Iron Man. Then the second generation of Iron appeared Man. Or the 3 generations of Iron Man. The ones mentioned in Luo Chen's diary before. What a boring idea. Chapter 57 Iron Man Surprise, I actually have a daughter. Tony Stark has imagined that he will not be able to do Iron Man after old age and decline in the future, and then hand over the Iron Man to the next generation of Iron Man, the so-called second generation Iron Man. Although judging from Luo Chen's later complaints, the so-called second generation Iron Man did very poorly. Anyway, at least in the eyes of common viewers like Luo Chen, it is very common. Although there may be problems with future heirs, successors are still a very distant issue for the current Iron Man. After all, he hasn't managed himself well at the moment, and he is still a novice with little experience in becoming Iron Man. Compared to this, Peter Parker, who is not a definite heir, but is actually the successor, is the real son. No, his own daughter does not have that kind of treatment. I don't know the scene when Peter Parker disappeared in his arms. Could it be his lifelong nightmare, but he still redeemed himself in the universe. Close black lens bracket. This is the second time it is mentioned that Peter Parker is the successor that Tony Stark really valued, and he was even dubbed as the treatment of his own son. Tony Stark was also a little stunned. Did he really treat that kid named Peter Parker so differently in the future? From this passage, what does Luo Chen want to explain? It means that you have a nominal successor, but that person does not do well and is not recognized by others. You also have a spiritual successor, who is even jokingly called being your own son means that you have successors. Nick Fury said with a smile. In his heart, the importance level of Peter Parker has also been raised a lot. Here's a Spider-Man who could be Tony Stark's successor. No, the point is, I will have a daughter in the future. Tony Stark said in shock. Although Luo Chen didn't mention it clearly, just a few words are enough. In the future, Tony Stark will have a biological daughter, and the treatment of this biological daughter does not seem to be as good as that of Peter Parker, so there is this emotion. Will you have a daughter? Nick Fury didn't quite believe this statement. It's normal for normal people to have daughters, but Tony Stark is not normal. He is a playboy, in his 30s, let alone married and started a business, and he doesn't even have a regular girlfriend, which is originally very strange. For the upper class of the lighthouse country, this situation is not very common. Many people even thought that Tony Stark would be an unmarried, maybe even Tony Stark himself thought so, but now he is suddenly told that you will get married in the future and have a daughter. What does it feel like? It's shocking, and it's incredible. What's wrong? Isn't it weird? Tony Stark, although he was also shocked in his heart, was very dissatisfied that Nick Fury saw him that way. Okay, but I guess, maybe we don't know who the baby's mother is now. Nick Fury shrugged, then said. But you should also see that, as mentioned later, Peter Parker dissipated in your arms. Can I understand the word dissipated as dead? Tony Stark was silent for a moment. There was indeed such a possibility. If he hadn't died, he wouldn't have become a lifelong nightmare. Although he still didn't know what kind of situation it was that could be called dissipated. It is difficult for him to imagine what kind of situation this is from a scientific point of view. What kind of blow has to be endured to be able to use the word dissipated to describe it? However, this also proves that Tony Stark's worries before were by no means unfounded. In fact, this is indeed a possibility. Although in the end, he redeemed himself and the universe as well. It's Hollywood shit again. He doesn't know how to redeem in the end. The person is already dead, how to redeem to be redeemed. Pay attention to the wording, he's talking about saving the universe. Nick Fury said. It didn't save the world, which means. It means that there will be a crisis in the future that will affect the entire universe, and in this crisis, I saved the universe. Tony Stark said directly. This is also in line with his understanding of the routines of those Hollywood blockbusters. During this time, he also asked Jarvis to do a lot of script structure for Hollywood blockbusters, and he probably knew some of their thinking, so many things mentioned in Luo Chen's diary were brought into the routines of Hollywood blockbusters by him, probably in his heart. I also know, probably from which stage of the story. It is also convenient for him to make corresponding judgments on this basis. Looks like a good thing. You were able to solve other crises in the level universe. Nick Fury said. Tony Stark shook his head and said, I can't see it, because the premise of solving other crises in the level universe is that there are other crises in the level universe. How many people will die in such a crisis? The death of that little guy Peter Parker is probably the same. It has something to do with other crises in this level universe, and now, how much do we know about the world outside the universe? Chapter 58 Tony. A brand new element left by my father. Nick Fury also thought of this point. To solve other crises of the level universe, the premise is that there is such a crisis of the level universe, and they know nothing about the outside of the universe. No, to be precise, Nick Fury knows something. After all, he had encountered aliens many years ago. Skrulls. There is even a friend who travels far in the universe, Captain Marvel. But that's all there is to know. The unknown is more terrifying than anything else. The more you know, the more worried you become. On the contrary, they are common people who don't know anything, but live happily and happily. All in all, after knowing this, both of them felt very heavy. But we knew it in advance, so at least we can prepare in advance. Tony Stark said. Yes, it's better than being caught off guard. This series of stories involves more and more aspects, and even spread to the scale of the entire universe. Nick Fury nodded. If it is not assumed that Luo Chen is talking nonsense, then it is likely that what he said is the truth, and each word has its own unique consciousness. The prelude to this era was opened by Tony Stark, and there is no going back, and there is no more peaceful life. The next thing should be the story of Tony Stark struggling on the verge of life and death. But this time, he was not kidnapped in Afghanistan, resulting in fragments of shells in his body, and he had to install an arc reactor in his body to absorb those fragments, so as to prevent the fragments from flowing into his heart and causing his death. There shouldn't be a plot like this, so it would be hard for Tony Stark to discover the real mystery left by his father, a new, undiscovered element. Tony Stark, who has never experienced life and death, can he still become the original Iron Man who is immortal, who can stand shoulder to shoulder with a god? Or simply evolved into a smelly mouth monster, close black lens bracket? Seeing the change in the words on the diary, Nick Fury laughed out loud, apparently seeing Luo Chen's complaint about Tony Stark at the end, that is, a stinky mouth. Tony Stark opened his mouth, he wanted to refute, but couldn't. He is different from the usual arrogant and conceited stinky mouth monsters. He knows that he speaks badly, has a poisonous tongue, and is arrogant, but he thinks, so what, he is still the super genius, super inventor, super genius. Philanthropist, super rich. With the blessing of so many titles, what happened to my arrogance? What's wrong with my bad mouth? I've worked hard all my life, and now I can't indulge in indulgence. Go on the music, go on the dance. So even if he wanted to refute it, he couldn't refute it. However, Tony Stark also saw other things. According to the original historical situation, he was kidnapped in Afghanistan, causing his body to be filled with fragments of shells, and even installed an arc reactor in it to absorb the debris. One can imagine how bad the situation is. It seems that in the original history, you should have suffered a lot, but at the same time, you will also have a deep understanding because of it, which is what Luo Chen said, your Stark industry will shift from military industry to new energy. There's a reason. Nick Fury said. I heard that there is a saying in Huaxia, Luo Chen's hometown, that the heavens will send great responsibilities to the people, and they must first work hard and harden their hearts. Your original experience is probably like this. No, I don't think so at all. For smart people, if they know something, they can learn from it. They don't have to step on the pit themselves to know that there is a pit in front of them. Tony Stark immediately retorted. He felt that with his intelligence, he would not need to be beaten like that in person to wake up. But the real mystery my father left behind. Tony Stark was quick to notice another point in the diary. His father, Howard Stark. Speaking of his father, he hadn't thought about it for a long time. If he didn't look at the photos, his father's appearance back then would have been a bit blurred. This is someone who has been away from him for a long time. He even thought that he had surpassed his father's knowledge back then, because the times were advancing, and his era was decades richer than his father's. So he can proudly say that his knowledge is more profound than that of his father. But now, the point mentioned in the diary broke his simple cognition, that is, his father didn't seem to be completely inferior to his knowledge. Even a kind of atom that has never been found before can be found. This discovery, whether it was decades ago or decades later, is enough to cause a sensation in the physics community. But why? I've never heard of it or seen it. Tony Stark was very puzzled. He had seen the relics left by his parents many times. Although they were sealed up later, he had never heard of such a thing. I think, I probably know something. Nick Fury said suddenly. Chapter 59. The first appearance of the Hammer God. What do you know? Tony Stark looked at Nick Fury suspiciously, and then asked. I probably know what your father left you. In fact, your father left a lot of things on our side. If there is any new element, it should be in it. Nick Fury, open your mouth and say. Tony Stark frowned, and then said, why are the things left by my father on your side? What is the relationship between you and my father? Nick Fury said, let me put it this way, do you know that you have been under the protection of our shield? Otherwise, why do you think you have been acting ostentatiously for so many years without even bringing a few bodyguards? How can you be so safe? If you are alive, do you think that everyone in the world is a good person? When Tony Stark heard this, his first reaction was disgust. As a member of the Beacon Country, his childhood education made him naturally disgusted with this. Even if it was the so-called protection, it was a kind of surveillance for him. But then he also felt that it made sense. He was very clear about how unrestrained his behavior was. After the death of his parents, it was like revenge. After he came out of the boarding school, he started to let loose, all kinds of waves flew up, and he often ran around without bodyguards. In the Lighthouse Country, a country where tens of thousands of people are killed by gunshots on average every year, it is a miracle that he can do well, originally. In fact, we were able to find out about dozens of attacks on you personally, and block them without your knowledge. Nick Fury said. Why are you doing this? It's not your responsibility to do this. Tony Stark asked. Yes, on the surface, there is no such responsibility, but it's all because of your father, Howard Stark. Nick Fury said. He is one of the founding elders of our shield. You probably don't know about this. This kind of security service is not only for you, it exists among the descendants of RSHIELD's senior executives. It is only you, which is particularly obvious, because it's too wild, and it's too famous, and the attacks on other people are not as many as you. Hearing this, Tony Stark felt a little embarrassed for the first time. But my father is your founding elder, but why don't I know about this? Tony Stark found that he seemed to know nothing about his father. He is more mysterious and powerful than he imagined. The stubborn old man in my original impression doesn't look completely accurate now. He may not be as good as himself in terms of knowledge, and limited by the scientific environment at the time. Some ideas could not be realized, but it does not mean that he is really inferior to himself. He already has many titles as Tony Stark, but besides being a super genius, super inventor, and super rich, his father is actually a super agent. This actually made him feel a little cool. It's protecting you, Nick Fury said. Although RSHIELD's work is different from the general agent organization, and its significance is much greater, but in essence, it is still an agent organization, so we cannot ignore the safety of everyone's loved ones, especially those who are hostile to us in this world. There are a lot, so not telling you is also a kind of protection for you. Besides, at that time, did you listen to these things? You only want to oppose your father. Tony Stark thought about it, and it seemed that this was indeed the case. There was nothing wrong with him. He was a rebellious rebel at that time. In fact, even now, he is deeply affected by the rebellious habits he developed at that time. I'll get someone to give you what your father left behind. I think it should be hidden in it. Nick Fury said. Good. Tony Stark nodded. He kind of wanted to understand why the original self had to find a brand new element left by his father to replace it when the current arc reactor was suitable. Because he used the arc reactor made of palladium element, this kind of thing is very good, but it is easy to be poisoned and then die quickly. A typical life for pretend opportunity. After all, his arc reactor is placed outside his body now, so he doesn't have to worry about poisoning, but if his arc reactor was placed inside his body at that time, it would cause palladium poisoning, and then he might face death. In this case, it is very important to find an available clean energy source. Although Luo Chen didn't say anything in the diary, Tony Stark still deduced the real process through some words and current information. After that, it's Hammer's turn to appear, the second of the big three of the Avengers alliance, the unprecedented Hammer God. For this son, Odin also worked hard, and stayed for a few more years. Close black lens bracket. Chapter 60 Nick Fury. Tony, Dawn and Hash 039, you bleed me. Although this is only a short paragraph, the amount of information contained in it is somewhat explosive. This Odin should be the Odin we know. Tony Stark said. It should be, if there is no other Odin. Nick Fury was also a little confused, which is too ridiculous. Although he knows that there are some vampires, werewolves and other mythical monsters that only exist in legendary, but this is completely different from knowing that a certain god is real. Could this Nima be the same thing? So, plus the Mjolnir mentioned by Luo Chen before, then the hammer god, shouldn't it be Thor? Tony Stark was also a little dumbfounded. What the heck, why are things all coming together? Who else can there be? Odin, Odin's son, Mjolnir, Hammer brother, the Hammer god, so many keywords gathered together. That is, if Odin didn't give birth to a Hammer god outside of the fairy tale, then there should only be Thor. Nick Fury said while holding his forehead. He feels that things are getting more and more complicated, and the things he has to deal with include but are not limited to vampires, werewolves, aliens, gods, aliens, superheroes, and supercriminals. With so many gathered together, his skull was about to explode. Luo Chen's diary said that this Mjolnir appeared in Mexico State, which seems to be the same year as I became Iron Man, so it should be this year. Tony Stark said. Now he also feels that the matter is serious. Before, he felt that at most, it would be fine if some aliens appeared. How could there be gods? What kind of story series is this? Why is it possible to add stories of gods in addition to superheroes, super criminals and aliens? Are these screenwriters afraid that the worldview will not be unified, leading to the collapse of the style of painting? Ah! Tony Stark couldn't help complaining. Faced with this sudden god, Tony Stark immediately wanted to complain about how the screenwriter of the company called Marvel made up such an outrageous story. He is the representative of the technology side, and with the addition of a mythical god, the style of the whole story will collapse. The style of painting is different. Shouldn't it be the cyberpunk Asgard who will appear at that time, Thor who will appear in a mechanical armor? It's not impossible. Those screenwriters can't do anything in order to make things reasonable. Anyway, if this is the case, it means that we may have to deal with Thor and even God King Odin in the future. No one thought that these Norse mythologies are actually true. Nick Fury said. And now the Earth has not even stepped out of the gate. How can we communicate with these gods? Diplomacy. Tony Stark sneered. It's good that these gods don't treat us like ants. Don't forget, when the European colonists came to the New World, how did they treat the natives, even if they treated the same kind, let alone those gods? We are fundamentally different creatures. Treat us like ants. The myth legendary may not be credible. Nick Fury's face turned even darker. His ancestors were sold to the New World by slave ships in this way, and then there was a long history of blood and tears, until he climbed to the position of S.H.I.E.L.D. director with his own efforts, which is considered to be outstanding. I don't know where the ancestral graves are emitting green smoke. I see that there are studies now that Angel may not look like a human at all, but a monster with eyes all over his body. In the same way, let's make a little calculation. Whether these Nordic gods may be the same, how can there be such a coincidence? In this world, how can there be aliens, gods, and strange universes with human shapes? This is not in line with science. Tony Stark complained. Okay, stop complaining, you're talking about the world of stories. Nick Fury immediately stopped Tony Stark from continuing to complain. This girl doesn't believe in God at all, and she's also an atheist. If you continue talking, who knows who will say what came out. It would be fine if there were no gods in this world, but there are gods, and I will meet one soon. Now that there are Nordic gods, what about the Greek ones? What about Egypt? What about Washa? What about Japan? What about India? No wonder. There are some strange agents in Washa's Spear Bureau, and some have the code names of some mythical characters, such as Monkey King or something. He always thought it was a code name, it was just a code name. After all, there are still people in the killer world who call themselves Zeus. But thinking about it now, shouldn't the Divine Spear Bureau have been in contact with the Chinese gods long ago? I don't know if I co-authored it. Thinking about it makes me even more aggrieved. Definitely, the most important thing is that in Legendary, there is also an all-knowing and omnipotent God. If Tony Stark continues to slander God like this, Nick Fury is afraid that he will go to hell in the future. You die as long as you die, run away, don't splash me with blood, hey. Seeing this, Tony Stark also stopped slandering, just glanced at Nick Fury, and immediately understood what he was afraid of. This corned egghead is not generally shrewd.